Chapter 653. P.S. There's still one more chapter at night. After Zhang Yan and Song Chuyuan talked in detail, they prepared to leave, so he said to him, I haven't returned for a long time. There's nothing to do here anymore, so I'll be returning to the sect in a moment. Fellow Taoist Song can go and retrieve the secret booklet left behind by your cult. After you're done, you can come to the West Divine House's gate of Hanyuan to find me. Song Chuyuan bowed and smiled bitterly. Taoist Master, please allow me to report. I'm afraid I'll have to return a little late. Zhang Yan heard that there seemed to be something hidden in his words, so he stopped in his tracks and asked, Is there some trouble? Song Chuyuan hesitated slightly before saying, In order to prevent others from coveting the place, there are quite a few great formations set up. Although I have a keepsake, I can only use it to retrieve the talismans. However, those restrictions outside the cave are different. That's to prevent people from recognizing the origins of the place. If they use other methods, I won't be able to do anything. I need to slowly wear them down with my magic power before I can enter. However, if there are too many restrictions, I'm afraid I'll have to spend quite a bit of time, and I won't be able to return overnight. Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. Did you and your senior brother originally plan to do so? Song Chuyuan bowed and said carefully, Senior brother Duan has studied many restrictions and once said he could deal with them, but now after saying that, he glanced at Zhang Yan and didn't say anything else. Zhang Yan thought for a while and asked again, How far is that place from here? Song Chuyuan replied, The place isn't far from here. If we travel with the help of the strong winds, it'll only take about 2 hours. Zhang Yan smiled and said, You can be considered my disciple now, so I'll go with you and help you solve this problem. Song Chuyuan said in shock, Could it be that Taoist master also knows this? Zhang Yan nodded slightly. Song Chuyuan was overjoyed. Using magic power to wear down the restrictions was simple, but it was also the stupidest method. If the restrictions were laid down slightly more complicated, wearing them down for dozens of years wouldn't be a strange thing. If his luck wasn't good, he might not be able to achieve his wish after 16 years. He said cautiously, I don't dare. When will Taoist master leave? Are there any other arrangements to be made here? Zhang Yan looked around and shook his head. No need. You lead the way. Song Chuyuan didn't dare to say much and only said, Taoist master, please follow this lowly one. With a tap of his foot, he turned into a gray mist that was hard to distinguish and flew into the sky. Zhang Yan also let out a shout and used his escape technique to catch up. In the blink of an eye, the two of them broke through the astral cloud and arrived above the heavenly layer. Then, they started a technique and a gust of astral wind was drawn over to wrap around their bodies. He fled as fast as lightning. Yuanying cultivators could all go above the heavens and borrow the astral winds to fly. Ordinary cultivators rarely had the chance to encounter them. Previously, Zhang Yan was searching for a place to set up the earthly fire heavenly furnace, which was why he was flying below the astral clouds. If Song Chuyuan and the other person hadn't been searching for a fellow disciple, they wouldn't have run into the restriction he had set up on the surface. When the two of them set off, it was almost sunset. After flying for 2 hours, the sun was already leaning towards the west. At this moment, Song Chuyuan slowed down and looked down for a moment. He pointed and said, Taoist master, that mountain boundary is below us. Zhang Yan also looked over. Below them was a tall mountain that stretched from north to south. However, the shape of the mountain was fragmented and messy. There were dangerous ravines and undercurrents everywhere. In the mountain, there were dangerous rocks that looked like collapsed pillars stacked on top of each other. It was rugged and lofty. A crystalline white stream flowed out from the cracks of the dangerous cliffs and lingered between the crushed rocks. The sound of water was clear and bright. At the end of the stream was actually a bamboo forest. It filled up a valley that was less than 100 acres in size. There were dangerous obstacles all around, and the clouds blocked the moon. It was difficult for birds to pass through. Smoke rose from the ravines in the depths, and the clouds shrouded the mist. If one flew past in the sky, it would be hard to notice if one didn't pay attention. Song Chuyuan lowered his body and descended to the top of a cliff. He glanced at it for a moment and then used a technique to touch his eyelids. When he opened them again, there was a layer of green light in his eyes. He actually looked out a few miles into the depths of the valley. Zhang Yan also descended and looked around. Just now, he couldn't see clearly from the top of the mountain. Now that he was near the foot of the mountain, he discovered that there were caves that looked like ant nests. There were hundreds of them, and he didn't know which one was the place where the corpse cult hid the book. Thinking that Song Chuyuan was using a technique to search, he stood to the side and didn't disturb him. After a moment, Song Chuyuan let out a sigh of relief and turned around. He bowed and said, "Spiritual Master, there is a restriction 5 miles in front of us that prevents me from looking. That will be the restriction in front of the mansion. I can only ask Spiritual Master to help break it." Zhang Yan looked down and took a step forward. He took out a talisman and held it between his fingers. He shook it slightly, and a ball of true fire appeared. Then, he flicked his finger, and the talisman shot out like a fire shuttle, straight into the bamboo forest. After looking at it for a moment, he had an idea. As the saying goes, stones from other mountains can be used to study jade. After he came to the Dongxing continent, in order to teach the way of restriction to his disciples, he had carefully studied the famous restriction formations in the continent. Thus, he was not unfamiliar with the restriction formations of this continent. The Dongxing continent was different from the Donghua continent. Because there were many celestial cities, regardless of whether it was the restriction formations or the restriction formations, most of them leaned towards the path of defense. Although the restriction in front of him had many changes, because the person who set it up didn't purposely hide it, he could tell with one look that it was born out of one of the Dongxing 9 forces formation, the Long Spirit Crouching Plate formation. To break the formation, as long as he found the root and the vein, all that was left was time. He made some calculations in his mind and said, "Fellow Taoist Song, please protect me." Song Yuanchu hurriedly said, "I understand." He once again went up to the clouds. Although he didn't see anyone along the way, because this matter involved him, he didn't dare to be careless. Zhang Yan sat down cross-legged and took out a bunch of bamboo tokens. He threw them on the ground and focused on deducing. After around 2 hours, he found the path to the entrance. He lightly smiled and struck a few seals at the restriction. Rumbling sounds resounded, and the restriction was easily broken by him. He used the spiritual machine to explore. Not long after, he encountered another restriction. This was not out of his expectations. The Dongxing continent was particular about people being the master of the formation and the formation being the support. They believed that if there was no one guarding it, there was no formation that couldn't be broken. Thus, unless it was a celestial city, they rarely used a large formation that consumed precious materials. Usually, they would set up dozens of small formations, layer by layer, and at the same time, they would set up blood warnings. If outsiders came, they would alarm the owner before they even entered. The person who set up this restriction formation obviously walked this path. Within a few days, Zhang Yan had consecutively broken through more than 10 forbidden doors. The deeper he went, the more complicated it became. Furthermore, it was connected to the spiritual chi of the mountains and rivers here. If Song Chuyuan was here to grind it down with his transcendence energy, not to mention tens of years, he wouldn't even be able to open it in 100 years. However, he wasn't impatient and treated it as studying formations. On the 9th day, Song Chuyuan heard a rumbling sound in the valley, startling countless birds. He couldn't help but get excited. He jumped down from the cliff and came to Zhang Yan's side. The scenery in front of him was very different from before. On the mountain wall, there was a cave door that was 10 feet tall. The 2 stone doors were wide open, but it was dark inside and it was difficult to see what was inside. At this moment, there was a loud roar that shook the whole mountain. Suddenly, a person rushed out from inside the cave. This person wore a bronze-fanged mask and wore jade armor. He held a dagger axe in both hands, and with his movement, dirty wind and dirty smoke surged out from behind him. He first raised his head to take a look, then he rushed towards the two of them. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed slightly. Immediately, a large hand formed by yellow smoke came out from the high cloud above him. With a slap, that person was struck down from midair. Even if it was a Yuaniing cultivator, if he didn't have a protective treasure light, he would be crippled even if he didn't die from this attack. However, the man just fell to the ground, but he stood up as if nothing had happened. He roared at the sky and rushed up again. Song Chuyuan was shocked and said, "Vigorous demonic corpse." He took a closer look and seemed to have thought of something. He hurriedly made a spell and pointed at it. Just now, the demonic corpse that was still ferocious instantly froze and stopped moving. Song Chuyuan wiped off the cold sweat on his head and said to Zhang Yan, "Spiritual master, this demonic corpse is refined from the body of a cultivator of the path of strength. It has infinite strength and is impervious to fire and water. Its body's sturdiness is no less than a talisman. Luckily, it's an item without an owner now. I can use the secret technique passed down by my sect to control it. If I were to face it head-on, I wouldn't be its opponent." Zhang Yan nodded. This refined corpse must be used to guard the cave. If other cultivators came here today, they would probably suffer. So he said, "Since this is an important place of your sect, I won't enter." After saying that, he swung his sleeve and a ball of black light flew towards him. Song Chuyuan unconsciously reached out to catch it, but he realized that it was the lifeless treasure coffin in his hand. He was stunned and said, "Spiritual master, this," Zhang Yan smiled and said, "This originally belonged to fellow Song. Now it's returned to its rightful owner." This talisman was not compatible with his technique. Even if he forcefully refined it, he might not be able to control it as he wished. It wasn't very useful in his hands. Previously, he took it to prevent the other party from playing any tricks. Now that he had made an oath, he naturally didn't need to worry about this. Moreover, from his point of view, with a Yuaniing cultivator working for his sect, its value was much higher than a dead object. Although Song Chuyuan also knew this item was after all a killing weapon. It was one of the few talismans in the Dongxing continent. Taking a step back, even if it was taken to the Celestial City, it could be exchanged for many good things. How many people wouldn't be tempted to get their hands on it? After taking Zhang Yan as his master, he originally didn't expect to get it back. Now that he had lost it, his heart couldn't help but be excited. He unconsciously took a deep breath and then bowed solemnly. He said, "Spiritual master, please follow me inside." Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. "Why? Is there a restriction inside?" Song Chuyuan lowered his head and said, "Please forgive this lowly one for hiding something from you earlier. Not only does this cave have the sect's official seal, there is also a secret storehouse hidden by Master Ancestor. It was originally used to restore the sect, and there are quite a few heavenly materials and earthly treasures inside. If Taoist Master has a use for them, you can take them all." When the corpse cult was attacked by the disciples of the two sects, Song Chuyuan's ancestor, Liao Chuxian, took the sect's official seal and fled here to hide. However, very few people knew that he had previously swept away all the treasures in the Celestial City and didn't let the Zhongtai sect or the Fengxiang sect take them. Zhang Yan thought for a moment. The many pill materials he wanted to find were all condensed within essence qi. It wasn't easy to find them in the 5 sects, but an evil sect like the corpse cult might have some. He didn't hesitate and nodded. "All right, I'll follow you into the cave to take a look. If you like this work, I welcome you to come to Starting Point and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." For mobile users, please read it here. Chapter 654. Zhang Yan and Song Chuyuan stepped into the cave. In front of them was a passageway made of bricks and stones. On both sides of the stone walls, there were long burning lamps. The candlelight was faint, and from time to time, male and female ghost faces would appear, crying and laughing at the two of them. These were the evil spirits that were imprisoned here, used to guard the cave. Song Chuyuan was a disciple of the corpse cult, so he did not look at them. Zhang Yan's expression was the same as usual. If it wasn't for the protection of this place, with the spiritual aura of the two of them, they would be able to shatter these evil spirits from a few miles away. The deeper they went into the passageway, the heavier the evil spirit became. About a moment later, a cave of several acres in size appeared in front of them. The top of the cave was polished to the point that it was as smooth as water. There were 3 pits below. 2 pits were filled with the bones of pigs, sheep, cows, and horses, while the one in the middle was filled with human bones. There were at least tens of thousands of them. Song Chuyuan looked at Zhang Yan's expression and carefully explained, "Jinren, this is the tomb of a feudal vassal. These bones were not made by the ancestors of our cult, but the vassal's sacrifice. Although our sect refines corpse tools, we also have strict rules. We must not kill ordinary people indiscriminately. Ever since I started cultivating, I have never dared to violate it." Zhang Yan did not comment. He heard that the disciples of the corpse cult usually hid in desolate tombs in order to refine corpses. Presumably, this place was the same. Even if there were strict rules, it was inevitable that such behavior would not be tolerated by the world. The two of them walked around the pit and saw 7 coffins at the end. The lids were all pasted with talismans, but one of them had already been opened, and the lid was slanted to the side. Song Chuyuan walked closer, looked at the empty coffin, and said, "This should be the location of the vigorous corpse demon spirit coffin outside the cave. The talismans must have loosened, so it ran out." He walked around the remaining 6 coffins. His eyes could not help but shine, and he gently exhaled. Immediately, a wind blew, blowing away all the talismans on the coffins. After waiting for a moment, there was movement in the 6 coffins. With several banging sounds, the coffin lids were lifted to one side. Song Chuyuan hurriedly cast a spell and pointed forward. Previously, this spell was able to suppress the vigorous corpse demon, but now it didn't seem to listen to him. The refined corpse in the coffin seemed like it was about to climb out. However, he did not panic. He took out the lifeless coffin that Zhang Yan had returned to him and released a gray fog that instantly covered the area below. He then said, "Withdraw." The mist instantly dissipated. He returned to the lifeless treasure coffin. When he looked at the 6 coffins again, they were already empty. His expression was very happy. He turned to Zhang Yan and said, "Reverend, these corpses were left behind by this lowly one's master ancestor. With these corpses, after 16 years on the dragon pillar, even if it's a second Yuanian cultivator, this lowly one has the confidence to fight." Zhang Yan nodded. These words were not empty words. The corpse cult was the last of the 3 evil sects to be eradicated. Naturally, there was a reason for it. Its tyrannical aspect was that the refined corpse left by the master could be used by the disciple. Just now, he had also seen the vigorous corpse demon. If a normal Yuanian cultivator were to face it head-on, he was afraid that he would not be able to do anything. After withdrawing the refined corpse, the two continued to go in. Not long after, they had entered the depths of the mausoleum. They arrived at a spacious hall. This place was like a marquis's mansion, with jade railings and gold and stone floors. A bronze sparrow sun-chasing lamp hung above, although it was as bright as day. On both sides, there were dark red curtains, and every 10 steps, a layer of gauze was hung. On both sides of the road, there were hundreds of gold and silver utensils, all filled with jade beads and agate, which were all buried with him. It was obvious that the marquis's status was quite high. At the end of the cave, there was only a stone wall. Above it was a purple copper eave, and below it was black and green bricks. The gap between the bricks was a finger wide, and mercury slowly flowed inside. On the left and right sides of the wall, there were 5 doors. The inside was dark, and no one knew how deep it was. Seeing that Song Chuyuan was hesitant to move forward, Zhang Yan couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Song, could it be that you don't know where to go?" Song Chuyuan hurriedly said, "Reverend, only one of these 10 doors is real. If you enter carelessly, the hidden treasures in the cave will definitely be destroyed. At this point, he seemed to suddenly remember something. He slapped his forehead and said, I forgot that there should be a Yuling from my sect here. Once this lowly one summons it, I will know. He took 2 steps back and pinched his fingers to make a sign. Not long after, a beautiful figure actually floated down from the wall. Zhang Yan turned his head to take a look. This woman was wearing a hair bun with a hairpin inserted horizontally. She wore a short skirt and a jade belt around her waist. Her figure was graceful, but upon closer inspection, her facial features were actually drawn with a brush. It was extremely stiff. So it turned out that she was just a paper person. The paper girl silently arrived in front of the 2 of them and bowed to Song Chuyuan. Then, she pointed to a passageway on the right that was close to the corner of the wall. Song Chuyuan clapped his hands and said, Done. After finding the correct path, the 2 of them followed this slanted downwards passageway for about 300 meters before arriving inside another cave. There was nothing else here other than a stone slab that was 3 meters long and 3 meters wide on the ground. On it was a picture of 9 ghosts devouring a heart, and it looked sinister and terrifying. Song Chuyuan took out a blood jade bracelet from his sleeve and lightly shook it downwards. The stone slab rumbled and moved backwards, revealing a hole. Zhang Yan glanced at it. Below was a stone room that was 10 steps wide. In the middle was a large black glazed vat that was sealed with white mud. On top of the vat was a wooden ox head, and the nose ring was rather similar to the blood jade bracelet that Song Chuyuan was holding. Song Chuyuan's mood was clearly rather excited. He jumped down and looked at the ox head, thinking to himself, the books that my grandmaster brought out that day should all be here. He rolled up his sleeve and put the item into his sleeve. Only then did he cast his gaze on the large vat, knowing that the storehouse should be inside. However, after inspecting it once, he revealed a difficult expression. He raised his head and said, This white mud is refined by mixing tan grass paste into the beard of the ink ghost. It can't be forcefully opened with brute force. It needs 2 Yuanying cultivators to use the yang fire to refine it, and only then can it be opened. If Jinren wants to take the items inside, I'm afraid you'll have to wait for a period of time. Zhang Yan didn't mind and said with a smile, There's no need to rush. After returning to the sect, it won't be too late to think of a way. Song Chuyuan hurriedly agreed. The 2 of them put away the large vat and quickly left this place. They sealed the door of the cave and then flew up into the sky, heading back to Zhangzhou Peak. 3 days later, Zhang Yan and Song Chuyuan returned to Deep Abyss sect together. As soon as they entered the sect, he called Zhang Boyan over and ordered him to think of a way to open the layer of mud with Song Chuyuan, while he himself returned to the cave. He entered a meditative state to cultivate. However, the moment he sat down, he felt that his body was different from before. There was a strange feeling surging up, as if an opportunity was right in front of him. Unconsciously, he moved his mind and immediately got rid of all distracting thoughts. He simply sealed the door of the mansion and ignored the outside world, focusing on cultivating his skills. Under the operation of the Xian technique, the Jun-Yang essence in the high cloud was turned into the purest spiritual energy. Under the guidance of his spirit, it flowed into his limbs and bones, and then traveled back and forth in his meridians. Every time it traveled, the high cloud above his head would solidify a little, and the mana around him would grow stronger. He didn't think about it in advance. Unknowingly, it was already the 7th year of his closed-door cultivation. On this day, he felt that the inside of his body was bright, and the accumulated spiritual pool was finally overflowing. He smiled and let his chi activity rise. It climbed to the top of his head, and then rushed out of the door. His body shook slightly, and the 3rd high cloud above his head suddenly solidified. With a rumble, a Yuanying leaped out and floated in mid-air, its body emitted a dazzling brilliance. At this moment, hundreds of disciples in Deep Abyss sect were still having their morning class. However, they felt a tremor under their feet, as if the mountains were shaking. Only then did a muffled sound came from afar. Everyone looked up and was stunned, and then a deep shock emerged in their hearts. Streams of five-colored light were released from the peak of the mountain, and at this moment, all the spiritual energy on Sangju Peak was gathering towards the peak. Because it was too violent, even the high cloud in the sky had a vortex of 100 miles in size, and there were occasional flashes of lightning. Chu Mu ran, Zhao Gu, and Wen Liang sensed it and ran out of the cave abode. They looked at the strange phenomenon in the sky, and a thought appeared in their minds. Sect Master Shixiang has broken through to the next realm. Mount Yi Sect, Huanghua Hall. Bai Jiaying was in the hall discussing with a group of elders. After Yong Fu passed away, he took over the position of sect master. His cultivation was the highest in the sect, and he was also the eldest disciple of the previous sect master, so it was natural for this to happen. However, at this moment, he didn't look too good. After the battle between Yong Fu and Zhang Yan, although Yong Fu gave up the position of Celestial City Master, Mount Yi Sect did not offer any tribute like the other sections. Since Yong Fu's death, Bai Jiaying felt that Mount Yi Sect was not as good as before, and felt that this matter must not be repeated, so he intended to make up for the tribute. However, as soon as this idea came out, it was strongly opposed by a few core formation elders in the sect. One of the elders said, Hanyuan School has only been in glory for 10 years. Mount Yi Sect has been in charge of Celestial City for hundreds of years, and our roots are deep. We only worship Zhong Tai as our upper sect, why do we need to listen to Priest Zhang? Bai Jiaying said in a deep voice, Uncle Master Mo, before Master died, he had repeatedly told us that we must respect the disciples of Hanyuan. His meaning is self-evident. Mount Yi Sect is deep in the Shinwu Mountain, and since Hanyuan School is the Celestial City Master, we should obey. The elder was thinking about something when a disciple rushed into the hall and shouted, Sect Master Shixiang, Sect Master Shixiang. He looked displeased and scolded, why are you making such a big fuss? When Shixiang was here, there were no such unruly disciples. Bai Jiaying could not help but frown when he heard him scold the locust. He looked down and said, Shixiang, why are you so flustered? The disciple pointed outside and said, Shixiang, quickly come and see, there seems to be some changes over at Hanyuan School. Bai Jiaying was stunned. He immediately went down the jade steps and left the hall. A few elders looked at each other and followed him out. Everyone looked towards the southeast direction and saw that 1,000 miles away, there was a cloud whirling, as if a gap had opened in the sky. Seeing such a scene, everyone was shocked. An elder said, could this be a demon cultivator's tribulation? Bai Jiaying felt that the spiritual vigor in the sky seemed to be gathering on the vermilion peak outside. Although he looked calm on the surface, his heart was in turmoil. He shook his head and said, it's not like that. I heard Master say that if a cultivator's mana is strong and unparalleled, when he breaks through to the next realm, he can trigger a phenomenon of heaven and earth. In Hanyuan School, there is only one person with such a cultivation, Immortal Zhang. If I am not wrong, this sect master's cultivation is one level higher. The elders were stunned. A cultivator breaking through to the next realm could actually trigger a phenomenon of heaven and earth. How strong must his mana be? Elders, Bai Jiaying turned around and looked around. He said in a deep voice, what I said earlier, does anyone have any objections? P.S. I came home a little late, but I still made it up. Chapter 655. After Zhang Yan had broken through to the next realm, he carefully comprehended for a while before slowly suppressing his aura. The raging billows around him also gradually retracted. Sensing that someone had arrived outside the cave, he said in a clear voice, Junior brothers, come in. Chu Mu ran, Wen Liang, and Zhao Gu entered the cave. Chu Mu Ran looked at Zhang Yan and said respectfully, we are here to congratulate immortal Zhang Yan's great progress in cultivation. Then, he bowed. Wen and Zhao Gu also bowed together. Zhang Yan smiled and nodded, Junior apprentice brothers, please rise. After the three of them stood up, Wen Liang suddenly sighed, I wonder when we three will be able to cultivate to the same level as senior apprentice brother. Zhang Yan laughed brightly, the great way is boundless and immortality is hard to come by. I am just a step ahead of everyone else. Zhao Gu was usually diligent in his cultivation. Seeing that Zhang Yan was in a good mood, he took the opportunity to ask a few questions about his cultivation. Zhang Yan had just entered the second stage of yuanying, so he had time to spare. Whenever Zhao Gu asked a question, he would answer it patiently. Chu Mu ran and Wen Liang listened to the questions and answers from the side. They felt that they had learned a lot and would occasionally add a sentence. Unknowingly, half a day had passed. At this moment, Jingyu said, "Master, sect leader Bai of Mount Yi heard that sect leader has made great progress in cultivation and specially sent a congratulatory gift." Humph, Wen Liang snorted and said, "In the past, Mount Yi Pai always used all sorts of excuses to get things done, but today they came very quickly." Zhang Yan said, "Bring it in." Jingyu walked into the cave and went straight to Zhang Yan. He held up the gift with both hands and said, "Master, the gift list is here." Zhang Yan glanced at him. Jingyu had once served under He Jinghuan in the past, so he was very perceptive. If it wasn't for the fact that there was something special about this item, he probably wouldn't have specially given it to him. Thus, he took a look at it and couldn't help but chuckle. He then passed the list back to Chu Mu Ran and said, "My 3 junior brothers, take a look as well." Chu Muran was the first to receive it. After reading it, he chuckled and passed it to Wen Liang. The latter cast a sidelong glance and snorted coldly. At least they know how to appreciate favors. Zhao Gu took the list and skimmed it several times. "Has Mount Yi Pai paid the tribute they owed?" he asked in astonishment. Wen Liang scoffed coldly, "Isn't it because he saw senior brother's great improvement in his cultivation and felt that it would be difficult for him to contend against you? That's why they rushed over to curry favor with him. If it were up to me, I'd return the gift list. When I need it, I'll go get it myself. There's no need for them to deliver it." Chu Mulan frowned and said, "Shitty, Mount Yi is under the protection of Zhongtai, how can we be reckless?" Wen Liang disdainfully said, "Now that Mount Yi Pai does not have Yong Daoren to hold the fort, it is impossible for Mount Yi Pai to be overseen." The Zhongtai sect was no longer the same as it was in the past. Although the Zhongtai sect was its superior sect, it could barely take care of itself now, so how could it stand up for them? "Senior brother, you are too cautious. With sect leader Shixiang here, what are you afraid of?" Chu Muran repeatedly shook his head, disagreeing with what he said. Zhao Gu then said in a deep voice, "When Shixiang, after Master Yong passed away, Bai Jiaying took over the position of sect leader. Although he was 1 generation lower than us, his temperament was steady and his aptitude was not bad. His natural endowments are not bad. The cultivation method of the sect leader of the Yishan Pai was passed on to him by Zhongtai. If nothing unexpected happens, it will not be difficult for him to reach yuanying in the future. Since he has admitted defeat, why should I reject him?" Zhang Yan nodded and said with a smile, "Zhao Shidi is right. Mount Shenwu is not our sect's territory. There's still a long way to go. Since Mount Yi has expressed goodwill, there's no need to reject it. When Shixiang, I know Mount Yi has made you suffer a lot that day, but Yong Fu has passed away and the rest are all juniors. There's no need for you to be angry with them. If you really don't like them, just ignore them in the future." Wen Liang cupped his hands and said, "I will listen to sect leader Shixiang. Whatever you say." Zhang Yan pointed at Chu Mu Ran and said, "Chu Shidi, go to Mount Yi on my behalf and take a bucket of Jinyao jade beads as a gift to calm them down." A bucket of Jinyao jade beads was only worth 1,000 spiritual shells. It was incomparable to Mount Yi's offerings. However, Zhang Yan's actions showed that he had no intention of pursuing the matter. Chu Mu Ran bowed and said, "I will arrange it now." Seeing him turn around and leave the cave, Wen and Zhao Shidi did not stay any longer and left. After the 3 of them left, Zhang Yan stood up and walked out of the cave. He went to the edge of the cliff and looked at the flowing river below. He began to think about the next step of his cultivation. To achieve the highest level of Yuanjin Dharmakaya, from this moment on, he could not refine any impurities into his body. The white moon essence that Zhou Chengju gave him was only enough for a year. After a few more days, when his cultivation had stabilized, he would start to refine this item. Among the 3 rare ingredients, he had obtained quite a lot of ghost sunflower and crouching earth lotus. However, he was still lacking a lot of snake ring jewels. Although Zhang Boyan brought some back last time, it was just a drop in the bucket. His Dan had reached the 1st grade and he did not know how much pure spiritual essence he would need to cultivate to the 3rd level of Yuanying. Therefore, the more he prepared, the better. He thought to himself, next, other than cultivating, I will have to spend most of my energy on searching for this item. Thinking about this, he said to Jingyu who was beside him, go and call Song Chuyuan. Song Chuyuan knew that his family background could not be seen in public. Therefore, after he entered the sect of Han Yuan, he did not go out except to cultivate. However, he did not dare to refine the corpse demon. He only dared to pick some powerful Dao techniques recorded in the books. When he heard that Zhang Yan had summoned him, he did not dare to hesitate. He quickly put down what he was doing and rushed to meet him. When he reached the peak, he paid his respects. He knew that this sect master's cultivation had improved greatly. He saw that his eyes were as bright as the stars, the spiritual energy around his body was like a tide, and the 3 clouds above his head shrouded the entire cave. He could not help but be shocked. He could roughly guess why Zhang Yan was looking for him. Without waiting for him to ask, he took the initiative and said, Jinren, ever since I arrived here, I have already checked the sect's storage. He took out a jade scroll from his sleeve and raised it above his head. I have recorded everything here. Zhang Yan's body did not move. With just a thought, he activated his mana and pulled the jade scroll over. The spiritual opportunity circulated inside and immediately understood what was going on. He then put it down and said, Fellow Song, you've been cultivating in my sect for 7 years. I'm sure you know what I'm looking for. Song Chuyuan hurriedly bowed and said, I have heard about it. After knowing about this, I have been paying attention. The items that Jinren needs are in our sect's storage. There is quite a lot of ghost sunflower and crouching earth lotus. I am willing to give them all to you. Only the snake ring jewel. He smiled bitterly. After all, this item needs to be condensed from 2 medicines. Even if it is refined, it will be used. However, I know one thing. 200 years ago, Zhongtai's sect came to our sect to ask for this item in order to refine a magic weapon. However, for some reason, it did not seem to be refined successfully. I believe that there should be quite a lot left. Jinren, you can go there and ask about it. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered. Song Chuyuan's words were not false. The 6th prince of Chu was not a disciple of the evil sect. The snake ring jewel was useless to him. However, he could take it out so easily. It was obvious that he did not go to other places to collect it. From the meaning of the letter, there should be quite a lot left in his hands. He pondered for a while, then said, Fellow Daoist Song was originally a disciple of the Corpse Clamor sect. Do you know where I can find this item? He was just asking casually, but Song Chuyuan had clearly thought about this matter seriously. He cupped his hands and said, Jinren, there is an immortal city in the South Vast Sea. Although it is under the rule of Ku Xian sect, one of the 5 great sects, it was actually set up by the people of my evil sect. Although the snake ring jewel is rare, it should still be there. I am willing to share Jinren's worries and go there to purchase it. Zhang Yan smiled and glanced at him. Song Chuyuan hurriedly lowered his head. He could see that this cultivator of the evil sect had his own calculations. He was originally planning to go to that immortal city. However, he did not expose him. He only asked, how long will fellow Daoist Song take to get there? When Song Chuyuan heard that Zhang Yan did not seem to have any objections, he was delighted. He had the sect's treasury in his hands. As long as he went to that immortal city, he would be able to exchange for a lot of good things. It was truly inconvenient to cultivate in Cold Abyss sect. As long as he went to the outside world, he would be able to refine a lot of powerful corpse devils. At the time of the gathering of dragon pillars, his chances of winning would increase by a lot. He pretended to ponder and then said, if everything goes smoothly, 1 year will be enough. Zhang Yan thought for a while and then said with a smile, when fellow Taoist song goes, I believe you will also want to see your old friends. There is no harm in coming back a little later. Song Chuyuan also knew that he had seen through his thoughts. He hurriedly bowed and said embarrassedly, I will definitely not disappoint Jinren. Zhang Yan nodded and said no more. Jing Yu picked up the gong and lightly knocked it. Song Chuyuan was also tactful. After bowing deeply, he retreated down the mountain. Zhang Yan stood on the cliff for a while before returning to his cave abode to meditate. In the next few months, there was nothing important to do in Cold Abyss sect. Other than refining by Yueying Shi every day, he would meditate and cultivate. Occasionally, he would come out to guide the disciples. Suddenly one day, when Zhang Yan was instructing two disciples, Jing Yu excitedly came to report, saying, Master, Big Wang Niangzi and Little Wang Niangzi have returned to the mountain, they are respectfully waiting outside the door. Zhang Yan smiled and said, it can be considered that it is time for them to return. Call them in. The Wang sisters came in from outside the door. Both of them were wearing plain dresses and looked like two white lotuses. When they saw Zhang Yan, they knelt down and kowtowed, saying in unison, Greetings, Master. Zhang Yan carefully looked at the two of them. As expected, after going out to train, their temperament and spirit were very different from before. Wang Kaiwei was originally introverted. Looking at her now, her manner and mannerisms were more dignified. She faintly resembled Lu Yenny. On the other hand, Wang Kating's eyes were shining and she had a smile on her face. However, much of her impetuousness had been washed away and she was more reserved. The Wang sisters had been out traveling for more than 20 years. They had traveled all over Dongshin continent. Not only had they greatly broadened their horizons, they had also sharpened their Tao hearts. Now, their cultivation was extremely deep. Using the secret method passed down by Zhang Yan, Wang Kaiwei had burned 28 acupoints. Wang Kating, after all, had better aptitude, so she could burn 30 acupoints. However, it was difficult for her to progress any further. Thinking that their collection of elixirs was almost complete, they returned to the mountain together. Seeing that their cultivation had greatly improved and had not fallen behind, Zhang Yan also nodded in satisfaction and said, Both of you, rise. The two girls acknowledged and stood up. At this moment, Wang Kating pursed her lips and smiled. She used her elbow to touch Wang Kaiwei and said, Sister, it is better for you to speak about that matter. Chapter 656. Wang Kaiwei unhappily glared at her younger sister, then bowed and said, Master, please allow me to report. While searching for medicine, Kating and I met a nascent soul senior who insisted on taking me as his disciple. I clearly stated that I already have a master, but this person refused to give up and followed us, saying that he wanted to meet master in person. After entering the territory of Chu, this person disappeared without a trace. Disciple and sister's cultivation level is not high enough, so we are unable to determine whether this person is following us or not. Literature Hall. Wang Kating interrupted, this person said his surname was Wei and he was a Kun cultivator. He said that he was a cultivator from Mount 8 Tassels. My knowledge is shallow and I can't tell where he came from. However, he helped sister and me several times. Zhang Yan had also heard that if the cultivators of the big sects in Dongshin continent saw that the disciples of the small sects had good talent, they would force them to change sections. This was not uncommon. This could weaken the potential of the small sects and save the trouble of looking for a suitable successor. The Wang sisters were not from the 5 big sects, so it was not strange for them to encounter such a thing. He thought for a while and asked, Where did you two meet this person? Wang Kaiwei replied, Master, it was in Qin country. When she spoke up to this point, Wang Kating seemed to have thought of something and sighed. She raised her white wrist and withdrew a jade slip from her pouch. She passed it to Zhang Yan and asked for credit. Master, when Big Sister and I were traveling outside, we recorded the terrain of all the mountains we passed by. There might be some omissions in the small areas, but there are absolutely no mistakes in the large areas. Zhang Yan chuckled and said, This gift is not bad. I will accept it. Wang Caiwei's expression was slightly worried. She said, Master, disciple sees that person has an obsession. He might come to the sect to pick a fight. Zhang Yan laughed and comforted her, it's fine. No matter who comes, I will deal with them. Master will deal with them. All of you just cultivate in peace. Now that his cultivation had improved by leaps and bounds, even if he were to face a third-level nascent soul cultivator, he wouldn't be afraid. Thus, he flew over and asked about another matter. The matter I told you before, do the two of you have any progress? Hearing him ask this question, the Wang sisters' expressions turned solemn. Wang Caiwei took a step forward and said, the two of us have also paid special attention to the boundary that Master instructed us to pay attention to. Within 100 miles, there is only a sect called Quantumin. Their influence is also rather great. There are 4 Yuanying Zenrins in the sect, and they control 3 immortal cities. After asking around, this sect should be a lower sect of Fengxiang Sword School. My sister and I have been waiting for 3 months and have seen people from Fengxiang sect come over several times. They must have a close relationship. Wang Kating also said, originally, your disciple and sister wanted to continue investigating and get to the bottom of it. But coincidentally, we met that Taoist nun Wei, and we were afraid that she would see some clues. Thus, I didn't dare to stay any longer and hurriedly left. Zhang Yan nodded slowly and said, the two of you have done quite well. That boundary was one of the 6 great seals left by the founding master of Qinsang School. Sect Master Qin once said that there would be a danger of breaking the seal in about 100 years. He ordered him to find a way to deal with it and not let it fall into the hands of others. Therefore, Zhang Yan instructed the Wang sisters to use the opportunity of their travels to investigate in secret. But the news that the 2 sisters brought back was not good. If Fengxiang sect were to interfere, the difficulty would be extraordinary. It must be known that the things under the seal were all vicious and ancient objects that normal cultivators could not suppress. It was extremely likely that it would attract the attention of the people from the heavenly abode. Seeing that he seemed to be deep in thought, the Wang sisters did not dare to say anything and stood at the side, holding their breaths as they waited. At this moment, a flying talisman suddenly flew into the cave. Jingyu stretched out his hand to catch it and opened it to take a look. He raised his head and looked over, saying in a small voice, Master. Zhang Yan asked, what's the matter? Jingyu bowed and said, Master, there's a Taoist nun outside the door. She kept saying that she wanted to pay a visit to Sect Master Hanyuan. I asked her to explain her origins but she refused to say it clearly. It's just that this person seems to be a Yuanying Zhenren. The disciple on duty at the foot of the mountain did not dare to make the decision and thus came to ask for instructions. Zhang Yan smiled and said, she sure came quickly. Wang Caiwei bit her lower lip and bowed, disciple has caused trouble for master. Zhang Yan waved his sleeve and lifted her up, saying with a smile, what does it have to do with you? To be able to catch the eye of an expert, it means that Caiwei, you have something extraordinary about you. I can't wait to be happy, so why would I blame you? It's just that the person who came didn't even think about it. How could I be willing to hand over such a good disciple? He then said to Jingyu, lead that Taoist friend to sit in the main hall, I'll go in a moment. Jingyu immediately accepted the order and left. At this moment, Zhang Yan looked at the Wang sisters and said, before I came to this continent, I went to Guangyuan sect. That day, I told Taoist Shen that I would use 30 years to get an item. Now that the time is approaching, after the two of you have condensed your pills, one of you must return to Donghua continent. Wang Kating's beautiful eyes lit up and she said, Master, disciple is willing. Wang Caiwei also said, disciple is also willing. Zhang Yan stretched out his hand and smiled, saying, the two of you don't need to ask for permission. After condensing your pills, whoever has a higher pill grade will go in place of master. The Wang sisters quickly responded. Just when they lowered their heads, they suddenly felt a breeze in the cave. When they looked again, the bed was already empty. Wang Caiwei was a little dazed as she said, Master is already in the second stage of Yuanying. Wang Kating smiled lightly and teased, I'm afraid sister is just guessing. With our cultivation, how can we tell what master's cultivation is like? Wang Kaiwei smiled slightly and said, although I don't know, Sister Yin has this ability. Wang Kading finally believed it. When the two sisters went out to travel, they had met with danger several times. During this period, it was thanks to this killer Yin blade that they were able to turn misfortunes into blessings. To say that the spirit in the blade, although it was sometimes unreasonable, it had never been wrong in judging a person's cultivation. Zhang Yan descended from the peak and rode the strong wind. He walked at a moderate speed towards the middle of the mountain. Not long after, he reached the middle of the mountain. After entering the main hall, he looked over and saw a Taoist nun standing in the middle of the hall. She held a horsetail whisk in her hand and her back was as straight as a spear. Although she was a woman, she was extremely tall. She had a high nose bridge, slanted eyes, and a thin mouth. Her face was long and narrow and her chin was slightly sharp. Her eyes were sharp and her body emitted a faint sense of dignity. Zhang Yan nodded slightly. A person with this kind of bearing must have some background. Those cultivators from small sects could not be compared to her. When he looked at this Taoist nun, she was also looking at him with a scrutinizing gaze. After looking for a while, there was a slight surprise in her eyes and she asked, "You are the head of Hanyuan sect, spiritual master Zhang?" Zhang Yan bowed and said, "That's right, I am." The Taoist nun nodded and said, "You are quite a character." She paused and waved her horsetail whisk and said, "I am not good at beating around the bush. This time, I came because I have taken a fancy to a disciple under sect leader Zhang. I want to take him as my disciple." Zhang Yan smiled and walked to the main seat. He then gestured and said, "Why don't you sit down and talk?" The Taoist nun frowned and waved her horsetail whisk. She then went to the guest seat at the side and sat down. Zhang Yan also sat down and said, "How should I address you?" The Taoist nun said with a stiff tone, "Surname Wei, Chi practitioner of Mount Baisi." Zhang Yan didn't mind and said, "May I ask, which part of I's disciple does Taoist fancy?" Taoist nun Wei said coldly, "This is a minor detail, but there is nothing that can't be said to others. Since sect leader Zhang asked, I can tell you. Before I entered Dao, I was once the commandant of the state of Yu and was skilled in saber techniques. After cultivating, I painstakingly researched and created a set of flying saber techniques. I believe it is not inferior to the sword techniques of the Fengxiang sect." At this point, there was an uncontrollable arrogance in her expression and tone. "Although I still have 300 to 400 years of lifespan, I still lack a disciple to inherit my mantle. That day, I met your disciple by chance. Her aptitude and nature are all to my liking. I hope that spiritual master Zhang will give her to me. If you have any conditions, feel free to state them." When Zhang Yan heard the two words "state of you," his heart moved and he had more or less guessed this person's background. He cupped his hands and said, "My disciple has also mentioned this matter to me. I heard that Taoist friend has helped me many times and I still have to thank you. As for the matter of changing sects, let's just forget about it." Taoist nun Wei was silent for a while and said, "I see that sect leader Zhang's cultivation is profound and has already reached the second stage of Yuanying. However, when one reaches the cultivation of spiritual master, every step forward is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Since you are not from the orthodox sects, I believe that you also lack techniques to study. I have 12 Dao books here, 6 are superior techniques and 6 are remarkable techniques. Sect leader Zhang only needs to give that disciple to me and I can take any 2 of them." Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, "I have my own sect's inheritance and can directly ask about the great Dao. There is no need to peek at other sects' techniques." Taoist nun Wei's face revealed a mocking expression. Even the 5 major sects did not dare to ask about the great Dao. The Xinwu mountain was only a wild and desolate place, so how could it have such superior techniques? In her eyes, what Zhang Yan said was only a bargaining tactic and wanted to extract more benefits from her. However, this was exactly what she wanted, so she made another condition: "I have 3 magic weapons in my sect's possession. They are all profound level weapons. If sect leader Zhang agrees, I can make the decision to give them to Taoist friend. Is this enough? Zhang Yan slowly shook his head and said in a deep voice, Taoist friend does not need to trouble yourself. I am a man of my words. My disciple will not change sections. Taoist Nun Wei suddenly felt somewhat impatient. She believed that no matter where she put the conditions, they would be generous enough. Even the cultivators of the 5 major sects would be moved. However, this person was not willing to relent. He was too greedy. However, she really liked this disciple, so she was willing to pay any price. She tried her best to speak in a calm tone. Sect leader Zhang, what exactly do you want? Just tell me directly. As long as it is in the Dongxing continent, I, Wei Shuling, can get it for you. Zhang Yan smiled faintly and stood up. He said, there is no need to discuss this matter anymore. Taoist friend has come from afar and is a guest. If you are interested, you can stay here for a few days. I still have important matters to attend to in my sect, so forgive me for not accompanying you. Finished speaking, he waved his sleeve and walked towards the back of the hall. Taoist Nun Wei could not help but be startled. Even after Zhang Yan had left, she still seemed to be somewhat in disbelief. Soon after, anger suddenly welled up in her heart. However, she also knew that she was in someone else's territory and could not easily flare up. Otherwise, she would be the one to suffer. After standing in the same place for a while, she angrily stamped her foot and turned into a rainbow light as she left the hall. Chapter 657. After Taoist Nun Wei left the cold abyss gate, her expression was ice cold. // This article comes from, she knew that she had an extraordinary background and had personally come to negotiate with them. Yet, she was turned away at the door. She felt humiliated. Although there was a ball of anger in her chest, she was still calm. No matter how small the house of Hanyuan was, it was still the ruler of a celestial city in the Shenwu mountain. That sect leader Zhang's cultivation level was similar to hers. Unless there was help from a fellow Taoist, there was nothing she could do. Her roots were in the south of Dongxing continent, but she did not know many people here. She frowned and thought for a while, then suddenly remembered, oh yes, there is a Taoist Lu in Chu country's Huakong mountain. I heard that his cultivation is profound, and he is resourceful. He is also an old friend of Uncle Master. Why don't I visit him first and ask him for advice? After she made up her mind, she took out a wooden box and held it in her palm. She chanted a spell in her mouth and took out a horsetail whisk. In a split second, colorful lights dyed the clouds and transformed into a flying boat. It was 12 feet long and inside it was a soft cushioned couch. Beautiful embroidered curtains and silver hooks hung high. On top of the table were lacquered boxes, gold wares, and mirrors. All of them were gorgeous and exquisite. She stepped inside and sat down on the couch. Then, she flew the flying boat towards the south. A few days later, the flying boat entered the territory of the Zhongtai sect. After determining the direction, she flew southwest along a large river that ran from the north to the south. After traveling for another day, they found the location of the Fire Hole Mountain near the Seymour Sea boundary. This place was flat and vast, with a view of 10,000 li. The shape of the mountain was peculiar, like a mound or a grave. It rose from the flat ground and faced the ocean, standing alone. From time to time, thick smoke and fog would rise from the summit of the mountain, rumbling and rolling up into the clouds. When the flying boat was 5 miles away from them, she felt that there was a restriction in front of her, so she couldn't go any further. Thus, she retreated to the sky and said, "Is Marshal Uncle Lu here?" Disciple Wei Shuling of Mount 8 Tassels is here to pay her respects. She shouted 3 times in a row. After a while, a deep voice came from the mountain. So it's a disciple from the small warehouse realm. I'm currently transferring my power, so please forgive me for not being able to come out to greet you. There's fire poison outside, so I can't stay for long. Please come to the shady cool temple. As the man spoke, the restrictions outside the mountain bloomed like a lotus flower, unraveling layer by layer. Taoist Nun Wei didn't hesitate and waved her horsetail whisk to activate the flying boat to descend. At this moment, a ray of golden light flew over. It was a fire-plumed golden sparrow. Its tail feathers were unusually long and were dotted with sparks. It was extremely beautiful. As it neared, it suddenly transformed into a young lady with jade-like bones and smooth skin. Holding a circular fan, she bowed to Wei Xiaobao and said, "Wei Daozhang, please come with your servant." Taoist Nun Wei nodded. He followed the girl into the mountain pass. Wherever she passed, the girl would wave her circular fan and the smoke in front of her would disperse. After flying for a few miles, she saw that the scenery around her was like the wind blowing on the surface of the water. Ripples spread out, and countless mountain stone pavilions were born and destroyed, clearly appearing out of thin air. She was inwardly shocked. The restrictions here were so strict that they could almost compare to the grand formation of a large sect. She thought to herself, "I heard from Martial Uncle that this senior is hiding here to hide from a great enemy. Looking at this setup, it must be true." Not long after, the view in front of her suddenly opened up. A small hill appeared in front of her. The terrain was gentle and the mountain stream was murmuring. There was a Taoist temple standing on top of it. At the foot of the hill, there were hundreds of houses. It was close to the hill on one side and the river on the other. The trees were lush and shady and there were paths connecting to each other outside. There were 3 to 5 farmers wearing bamboo hats working in the fields. It was a beautiful scene of the countryside. The outside world was filled with smoke and fire, but this place looked like a paradise. The two of them landed in front of the Taoist temple. The girl said, "Wei Taoist, please come in. My master is waiting inside." Taoist Nun Wei didn't bother with pleasantries and walked inside. After passing through the mountain gate, she saw 12 green stone lotus seats on both sides. Further ahead was a brass incense burner. A Taoist was standing on the steps with 2 female servants holding swords beside him. The Taoist had fair skin and phoenix eyes. There were 3 tufts of green beard on his chin. He wore a cloth robe and his smile was very gentle. There were 2 strong clouds above his head that looked like flying flames. But Taoist Nun Wei took a look and felt that this person's appearance was different from what she remembered. She frowned and her tone also became colder. She said, "Is this Taoist from the same sect as Martial Uncle Lu?" The Taoist chuckled and said, "I, Tsingtsongluan, Martial Brother Lu died 10 years ago and reincarnated." When Taoist Nun Wei heard this, she couldn't help but feel disappointed. She said, "Since Martial Uncle Lu is no longer here, Martial Nephew will take her leave." Tsingtsongluan took a step forward and called out to her, "Martial Nephew Wei, don't be in such a hurry to leave. Based on the friendship between our 2 sects, Martial Nephew Wei has come to I and I have to treat you well. Otherwise, when people from the same sect talk about it in the future, I'm afraid they will scold me, Tsingtsongluan, for being unreasonable." Taoist Nun Wei stopped and thought about it. She said indifferently, "That's fine too." Tsingtsongluan was secretly delighted. He thought to himself, "It's rare to see someone from the small granary realm. It's all thanks to my relationship with Martial Brother. If I can get to know him, I might be able to gain some benefits." In the 10,000 years of Dongshan continent, there were only 2 almighty cultivators who ascended. One was the founder of Xianyu cult and Zhongtai sect, and the other was the master of the small granary realm. This almighty cultivator came from another continent 1,500 years ago. No one knew his origins. However, after he came to Dongshan continent, he did not establish his own sect. Instead, he opened up a small world. Before this cultivator ascended, he had a hobby, which was to collect secret manuals of techniques, treasures, and spirit herbs. The small granary realm was not isolated from the world. Instead, it opened up once every 60 years and invited fated people to be guests. Anyone who attended the banquet could take away an item before leaving. Tsingtsongluan also had this thought. He warmly invited Taoist Nun Wei to sit in the temple and served her tea. He was quite thoughtful and tried to get information from her. Taoist Nun Wei had a cold temperament and was not good with words. Her original intention was to ask for help. After exchanging a few pleasantries, she revealed her intention. After Tsing Tsongluan heard it, he was stunned. He subconsciously straightened his body and pointed to the north. He asked, "Martial nephew, are you talking about that Taoist Zhang from the Deep Abyss sect?" Taoist Nun Wei saw his surprised expression and frowned. Could it be that this person is very famous? Tsing Tsongluan stroked his beard and took a look at Taoist Nun Wei. He then lowered his gaze and said, "His reputation is indeed a little. It is rumored that this person is not to be trifled with." Taoist Nun Wei was unhappy. She sneered and said, "How is he not to be trifled with? I have seen this person before. It is not like he has 3 heads and 6 arms." Tsing Tsongluan coughed and shook his head. He said, "Martial nephew has been in the 8 Tassels Mountain for a long time. I do not know about this person." "Oh, have you heard of that Chu state preceptor Hui Xian ancestor?" Taoist Nun Wei said, "This person is a little famous." Tsing Tsongluan said, 20 years ago, 2 disciples of Hui Xian ancestor Hui Xian became enemies with that sect head Zhang. They agreed to a duel and even invited 3 Yuanying peers to help. Who knew that in the battle at the Beima Sea realm, the 5 of them joined hands and were actually unable to defeat him. Only the eldest disciple of Hui Xian ancestor Wang Guangyuan managed to escape. It can be imagined how powerful this person is. Taoist Nun Wei revealed a look of surprise. She was not ignorant. To be able to fight 1 against 5, not to mention the depth of his Taoist skills, he must have some powerful Taoist techniques. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to do so. She said coldly, "No wonder this person is so arrogant." Tsing Tsongluan sighed. "If it is only so, it is still fine." Later on, that person took out 3 top-grade profound weapons. I heard that it was only to exchange for 3 elixirs. Think about it. If it was not for his extraordinary background, how could he casually take out these 3 magical weapons? When Taoist Nun Wei heard this, she suddenly grabbed the handle of her horsetail whisk. She had previously said in front of Zhang Yan that she was willing to exchange 3 profound weapons for him. It turned out that this person did not care at all. At that time, he was probably laughing at her in secret. When she thought of this, she suddenly felt a surge of anger and humiliation. Tsing Tsongluan looked at her and asked tentatively, "If martial nephew wants to get a disciple from this person, I am afraid it will not be an easy task. How about I find you a disciple with spiritual intelligence?" Even though he was willing to help Taoist Nun Wei, it was also because he wanted to gain some benefits. He was not willing to provoke a strong enemy like Zhang Yan. Taoist Nun Wei had a stubborn temper. She said coldly, "I do not believe that with my reputation in Shaotsang Jing, I cannot get a female disciple. If Priest Tsing cannot help, then forget it." When she finished, she brushed her sleeves and walked out. Tsing Tsongluan was not willing to let her go just like that. He quickly stood up and said loudly, "Martial nephew, please wait." When senior brother Lu was still alive, he once said that he owed a favor to a disciple in Shaotsang Jing. I thought of a way to repay it and have long wanted to pay my respects. It was just that at that time his Xian skill had not been completed and he had enemies outside. He did not dare to leave this place easily, so he was delayed. Since martial nephew has something to do, as your martial uncle, how can I not help you? Taoist Nun Wei stopped and turned around to ask, "Martial uncle Lu, how are you going to help me?" Tsing Tsongluan smiled and said while twirling his beard, "I have a brilliant plan. Martial nephew, please return to your seat first." After she returned to her seat, Tsing Tsongluan said, "I dare to ask, does martial nephew want that female disciple to be your disciple no matter what, even if you have to give up some treasures?" Taoist Nun Wei waved her hand and said, "Martial uncle Lu, if you have something to say, martial nephew has made up his mind to take that disciple." Tsing Tsongluan nodded and said, "That Taoist Zhang took out 3 profound weapons in exchange for 3 spirit medicines, which are Crouching Earth Lotus, Ghost Sunflower, and Snake Ring Jewel. As long as he takes out these 3 items, won't martial nephew's matter be easily solved?" Taoist Nun Wei said doubtfully, is this feasible? Sing Tsungluan smiled and said, think about it, that Taoist Zhang is willing to give away 3 profound weapons. He only has one disciple in the Xian light realm who does not have great aptitude and doesn't seem to be a successor of the orthodoxy. Why would he be reluctant? Taoist Nun Wei also felt that it was reasonable. She liked Wang Kaiwei because of her talent in flying daggers. In terms of aptitude, she was inferior to her other sister, so she nodded unconsciously. Sing Tsungluan observed her expression from the side, and seeing that she was moved, he put on a serious expression and said, Martial nephew also knows of I's background. I happen to have some crouching earth lotus and ghost sunflower here, but I'm afraid it's not enough. I wonder if there are any in small granary realm. Martial nephew can go back and look for them. Taoist Nun Wei said proudly, what kind of spirit medicine is there in my small granary realm? There is no need for Martial Uncle Tsing to spend money. Sing Tsungluan smiled and said, even so, we still need to be prepared. Martial nephew, why don't you contact your friends from all over and go to Hanyuan together to strengthen your reputation? With such soft and hard methods, I'm not afraid that Taoist Zhang will not agree. He also had his own plans. With enemies outside, it was very inconvenient to move around. If he used the name of small granary realm to go somewhere, that person would have to think thrice if he wanted to touch him again in the future. Chapter 658. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. On the surface, Hanyuan Gate looked no different from before, but in reality, it was much more heavily guarded than before. This move was not to guard against Taoist Nun Wei, but because the Wang sisters had already reached the stage where the medicine would condense into a pill. Zhang Yan had also taken time out to personally protect them these few days, so he could not allow the slightest mishap inside or outside. To prevent any accidents from happening, even Zhang Boyan personally went to guard the gate. Under Zhang Yan's 20 years of management, Zhangzhou Peak was no longer what it used to be. The formation gate was as strong as a celestial city, and every formation was guarded by a disciple he had personally taught. Without the token given by the sect master, anyone flying in the sky would definitely be struck down by the formation thunder. It was rare to see such emphasis on the defense of the gate in Dongxing continent. Zhang Boyan sat in a temple on the left of the gate. This place guarded the mountain path, and anyone who entered or exited would be immediately detected by him. At this moment, he was holding the sadness and happiness puppet in his hand, turning it over and over, his eyes flashing with uncertainty. A voice came from outside, Master, your disciple is here. Zhang Boyan did not even raise his head, and said in a deep voice, come in. Footsteps sounded, and a tall, handsome youth walked into the hall. It was Zhao Yang, who went up the mountain alone to become a disciple at a young age. He came up and bowed respectfully, saying, Master, your disciple has successfully opened his meridians. After becoming a disciple of Zhang Boyan, he only started to cultivate the source-seeking scripture at the age of 14, practicing the method of splitting the soul. Because there were no demons in the mountain, Zhang Yan had strict rules that forbade killing, so he could only suck the essence and blood of demons. After a few years, his essence had become extremely strong. 20 days ago, he went to the Jade Elixir pool to open his meridians, and just now was the day he came out. Zhang Boyan's gaze roamed around his body, and he shouted, show me your pulse. Zhao Yang responded, and he activated his technique. After 10 breaths, a thick yellow cloud appeared on his body. A thick yellow cloud gradually appeared on his body. It was like sand that gathered together and did not disperse for a long time. Zhang Boyan's eyes flashed. Zhao Yang's was probably of the 5 elements, it was clear to see, in terms of character he was above average. He thought to himself, this disciple is indeed fated with me. He had already thought about it. If Zhao Yang could open a high-grade pulse, naturally, he would try to find a good cultivation technique for him so that he wouldn't waste his talent. If it was a low-grade pulse, then he would only be able to teach him some shallow cultivation techniques. In the future, he would only be able to order him around like a servant. It was good that he could be his successor in the future. He threw the doll of sorrow and joy into Zhao Yang's arms and said, take it, I'll give you this magical treasure. From tomorrow onwards, I'll teach you my sex xian technique. Zhao Yang was overjoyed and grabbed the doll tightly. He knelt down and kowtowed, "Disciple thanks master." At first, he was a little disappointed that he couldn't become Zhang Yan's disciple. However, Zhang Boyan was a Yuanying Jinren after all, so he felt lucky. After all these years of contact, he felt that his master was really deep and immeasurable. Zhao Yang's father was from the Fuyang sect and he had personally seen him fight with a few people from the same sect. However, even if those few people worked together, they wouldn't be his match. Thinking about the future, with a wave of his hand, he would be like Zhang Boyan, having thousands of demons by his side. His heart was filled with passion. At this moment, the mountain bell rang. Zhang Boyan listened and got up. "The manor head has come out." Zhao Yang looked towards the peak and said, "After the two senior sisters formed their pellets, our Deep Abyss sect will have 2 more pellet transformation cultivators." Zhang Boyan heard the envy in his words and scoffed, "Pellet transformation cultivators aren't much. With your talent, as long as you cultivate hard, you will be able to step into that realm in 100 years. Zhao Yang said respectfully, "My disciple will certainly not disgrace master." Zhang Boyan chuckled. Zhao Yang was young, but he already had some shrewdness. However, many of the techniques of the Netherworld Spring sect required people with a sharp mind to cultivate. This kind of mind was more to Zhang Boyan's liking. He said, "If that's the case, there's no need for tomorrow. You can come back with me now." With a turn of his body, he'd already transformed into a strand of thick yellow smoke that surged into the air. He swept Zhao Yang up and returned to the abode. In the cave abode of Tsangzhu Peak, the Wang sisters' faces were glowing. White smoke was coming out of their noses and all the acupoints on their bodies were emitting a dense mist that floated 3 feet around them. Just a moment ago, the two of them had formed their golden cores at almost the same time. At this moment, they were still dispelling the surging killing intent in their bodies. Zhang Yan checked and found that the two sisters had formed their 4th stage golden cores. Although they had no chance of entering the top 3 stages, their foundations were still solid. If they cultivated hard, it would not be an extravagant hope for them to reach Yuanying after 200 or 300 years. If they wanted to advance further, it would depend on their own luck. After a moment, Wang Kating was the first to wake up. After looking inside her body, she knew that from now on, she was already a core transformation cultivator. A wave of joy immediately surged in her heart. She directly bowed down on the praying mat and said, "Disciple thanks master for protecting me." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Kai Wei seems to have obtained a fated chance. I'm afraid that she will wake up later. Don't disturb her and wait patiently. I still have something to talk to you two about later." Wang Kating lightly agreed and sat back down. She carefully felt the various differences after forming her golden core and before. Just now that Wang Kaiwei had formed her golden core, she felt the killing blade hidden in the acupoint between her eyebrows jump slightly. Almost in an instant, a cultivation technique flowed into her mind. Ever since she obtained this killing true weapon, she had been practicing the yin-yang origin flying blade of the Chongyue True Temple. It was only because of her cultivation level that she couldn't learn a superior cultivation technique. Now that she had stepped into the core transformation stage, the magic treasure impatiently passed on the cultivation technique to her. Wang Kaiwei had heard that using the opportunity of breaking through to the next realm to comprehend a cultivation technique could yield twice the result with half the effort. Therefore, she didn't miss the opportunity and carefully comprehended it. When she came out of her meditative state, she found that 6 hours had passed. She hurriedly stood up and apologized. "Kaiwei is afraid that master has been waiting for a long time." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "It's all right. Fated chances are hard to come by and can't be sought. Kaiwei, it's a good thing that you were able to grasp it." Speaking up to this point, his gaze swept over the two of them and said, "After entering the core transformation stage, the two of you can practice divine abilities. The divine abilities that I'm good at are difficult to practice, and according to the sect's rules, I can't teach them lightly. Fortunately, there are a few divine abilities in the Jade Shade sect that can be practiced without the need of a fusion cultivation technique. I'll teach them to you now. Take them back and diligently comprehend them. He waved his hand and 2 jade slips flew down. Wang Kating raised her wrist and received them. She inserted a strand of spiritual energy into them and a cultivation technique appeared in front of her eyes. After looking at it, she discovered that this divine ability was called Burning Orchid and Wormwood together. This technique cultivated a strand of clear energy in the ancestral aperture. When fighting with someone, if the opponent used a powerful Dao technique or divine ability, she only needed to give up this energy and it would turn into essence Qi of the same origin. It would no longer cause any changes. It was very strange. The only flaw of this technique was that after using it, it would take a long time to cultivate it. However, when this energy was released, it was like an orchid or musk. It had an endless delicate fragrance and was misty like a cloud immortal. Not only did it look good, but it also didn't have any worldly aura. It was exactly what she wanted, so she happily accepted it. Wang Kaiwei took the jade slip and examined it. A supernatural power also appeared in her mind. This technique was called accumulating feathers and sinking boat. This supernatural power was completely used in fights of magical powers. Normally, one could absorb the magical power that one cultivated into a bead. When fighting with others, one could release the qi and subdue the enemy in the blink of an eye. However, this technique had a similar flaw to the burning orchid and wormwood together. After accumulating mana and using it once, one would need to spend time to refine it again. However, she already had the Demon Slayer blade, so this technique had another killing move. Seeing that both of them were happy, Zhang Yan smiled and said, I said before that whoever has the highest core realm can go to Donghua. Now that both of you have achieved the 4th grade gold core, I might as well let you go back together so that you can take care of each other on the way. However, there are thunderbolts blocking the way back and forth in the open sea. I'll give you the Dragon Country's ocean boat. It's already the end of the year, so there's no need to rush to leave. Go back and consolidate your cultivation. After spring, you can choose a suitable day to go out to sea. With a snap of his fingers, a ball of smoke wrapped around a small boat and flew out. He had already given the Dragon Country's ocean boat. The 2 sisters hurriedly and carefully received it. Zhang Yan waved his sleeve and said, both of you can leave now. The Wang sisters acknowledged and bowed deeply before retreating from the cave. After the 2 of them left, they were both excited and used their core fiend flight technique. After circling the mountain for more than 2 hours, they finally floated down the peak together. At this moment, someone came up from the mountain path. It was Chu Mu Ran. He looked at the smoke at the feet of the 2 girls and asked with a smile, Martial nieces, what grade of core realm have you achieved? The Wang sisters floated down from the cloud of smoke. On the street, Wang Kaiwei said, we've both achieved the 4th grade gold core. We've embarrassed ourselves in front of Martial Uncle Chu. When Chu Mu Ran heard that both of them had achieved the 4th grade gold core, he praised, Martial nieces, you are indeed talented. From his point of view, it was extremely difficult to achieve a golden core of the upper 3 grades. It was rare even in the 5 major sects, and those who could achieve it were all direct disciples. He himself was barely at the 6th grade, so if he could achieve the 4th grade gold core, he would most likely achieve the Yuanying realm the next day. However, the Wang sisters didn't think much of themselves. Master Zhang Yan aside, there were only a few people in the past 10,000 years who had achieved the 1st grade gold core. Eldest senior sister Lu Yenny had achieved the 2nd grade gold core, and Wei Zihong had entered the sect later than them, but he had achieved the 3rd grade gold core. In comparison, the 4th grade gold core wasn't even worth mentioning. Thus, they only took Chu Mu Ran's words as a courtesy and thanked him before leaving the mountain. Chu Mu Ran watched the 2 of them leave and suddenly sighed. He shook his head and continued up the mountain. When he arrived at Zhang Yan's cave, he was called in after sending a message. When he entered the inner room, he bowed and said, Greetings, sect head's senior brother. Zhang Yan smiled and asked, Junior brother, is there anything you need from me? Chu Mu Ran hurriedly said, "Senior brother, you asked me to find out about that Taoist nun Wei's background. I've already gotten some news. That person's background is indeed not small. She's a disciple of that small warehouse realm." Zhang Yan's eyes flashed and he nodded. She's indeed a disciple of that realm. After all, he had been in the Dongxing continent for more than 20 years. In order to search for pill ingredients, he paid attention to collecting secret information from all over the world. When he heard Wei Shuling mention the two words "you country" that day, he had already guessed her identity. This was because the small warehouse realm was within this country's borders. Chu Mu Ran said, "The disciples of the small warehouse realm have a wide network of friends. The last time that Taoist nun Wei asked for a disciple, she probably wouldn't give up. Senior brother, you should be on your guard." Chapter 659. Zhang Yan sat on a praying mat and held a white jade fruit the size of a goose egg in his hand. This was the Bai Yuing fruit. Just one of it was enough for him to use for a year of cultivation. A few days ago, he refined 7 of them in one go. In addition to the previous few rounds of refinement, he had a total of 10 in his hand. Although it was more than what he had expected, it was only enough for him to use for 10 years. If he wanted to cultivate to the 3rd layer of yuanying, it was still far from enough. However, with these 10 Bai Yuing fruits, he did not need to be restricted to this corner of the world. He could go out to look for it. For example, the gathering of the dragon pillars would be an excellent opportunity. He flicked his finger lightly and the Bai Yuing fruit flew up and disappeared into the cloud above his head. Then, he relaxed his limbs and channeled his Xian Qi. He slowly formed a strand of Yin essence Qi and under the control of his mind, he guided a strand of Jun Yang essence Qi over. The two Qi fused together and finally transferred it into the yuanying. After refining this strand of pure spiritual Qi, he looked inside and saw that the yuanying seemed to be dyed with a layer of golden light. The light was flowing and shining, and the Qi of profound Qi in his body was not only much stronger, it seemed to be clearer than before. He was secretly surprised. At his level of cultivation, every step forward was extremely difficult. But with just a strand of Qi of profound Qi, he could see progress. No wonder this method was the Zhou clan's secret. He calmed his mind and concentrated on refining it. This practice lasted for a few months. It was not until a small half of the Bai Yuing fruit was refined that he stopped. He removed the prohibition, opened the cave door and walked out. Jing Yu was dozing off at the side. When he heard the footsteps, he quickly rolled over and rubbed his eyes. He bowed and said, "Master." Zhang Yan went up to the jade couch and sat cross-legged. He asked, "Is there anything important recently?" Jing Yu hurriedly said, "There is one." When Master was in seclusion, Chu Daozhang came several times. Recently, he was together with Xiao Daozhang, waiting outside the door every day. Yesterday, he waited for the whole night. Just now, he has just left. Even though Zhang Yan was in closed-door training, he could still ring the bell if something happened to the sect. Since Chu Mu Ran did not do so, Zhang Yan's heart was in turmoil. Since it wasn't something too urgent, he immediately ordered, "Go and call them back." Jing Yu immediately chased them out of the cave. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Chu and Zhao entered the cave one after the other to see Zhang Yan. He hurriedly stepped forward to greet him. Chu Muran breathed a sigh of relief. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and said, "Thank goodness senior brother has come out of seclusion." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I wonder what happened in the sect that made junior brother so anxious." Chu Mu cupped his hands and said, "Senior brother, I almost forgot something important. In a few months, it will be the Dongxing continent's festival of gods. At that time, a whirlpool will form in the Beima Sea realm. The sea will rush in with the momentum of toppling the land, ravaging the mountains and rivers. This happens once every 400 years. Just now, the sea will recede. Therefore, I want to ask the sect master to order all sects to move to the East Shrine Mountain to avoid the disaster." Zhang Yan immediately heard something wrong and asked in a deep voice, "Since it is a story of the sea, why didn't I hear about it before?" Why didn't I hear about this before? Why didn't anyone come to my place to talk about it? Chu Muran sighed. In the past, Celestial Civ sect was ordered by Tseng Zhongtai to guard the whirlpool. Every time this disaster occurs, more than 20 nascent soul elders will go forth with a secret treasure to suppress it, so that it won't cause a monstrous wave. The reason why this sect occupied the western and northern seas in the past and had a close relationship with Zhongtai was because of this reason. However, ever since the Python tribe of the outer continent occupied that place, the immortal city has long been useless. Presumably, no one will do this anymore, so we have to be on guard. Zhang Yan pondered for a while and said, Junior brother Chu, do you think the Python tribe knows about this? At this time, Zhao Gu said, the Python tribe has only been here for 100 years. If Celestial Civ sect wants to hide it, they probably don't know about it. Zhang Yan nodded his head. It was highly possible that the Celestial Civ sect wanted the Python tribe to suffer a loss. The Zhongtai sect should know about this, but there was no news from them. It was likely that they were planning to do the same. However, the Python tribe had a heavenly abode master, so it wouldn't be difficult for them to avoid this disaster. It was just that the Whaley Mountain would be affected. If he and Ren Si joined forces, together with the formation and Zhang and Song, they might be able to resist it. However, since he hadn't seen the situation, he didn't dare to jump to conclusions. He needed to be prepared in advance. Thus, he said, this can be done, but we need to pay attention. Not only our Taoist sects, but the people in the mountain should also move away. Just order the sects to deal with it. Junior brother Chu, junior brother Zhao, you two go and look after them, lest they disobey and only care about their own lives. Chu Mu thought for a while. There were more than 12 million people in the 76 villages of 9 countries in the Shenwu Mountain. If they relied on their own strength to move to the East Shenwu Mountain in a few months, it would be as difficult as reaching the sky. However, with the means of Taoist cultivators, it wouldn't be difficult. The only problem was that the fertile land that had been cultivated for hundreds of years would be destroyed. Zhang Yan seemed to have seen through his thoughts and said, the 38 sects on Mount Shenwu enjoy the worship of the people of the various countries. In times of crisis, it is only right for them to lend a helping hand. Zhao Gu said seriously, Senior Marshal brother is right. Zhang Yan looked at Chu Muran and praised him, since this whirlpool is a life cycle of 400 years, junior brother Chu must have just stepped into Dao not too long ago. It's rare that you can still remember this incident. A look of shame appeared on Chu Muran's face. He cupped his hands in salute and said, Sect Master Shixiang is overpraising me. This matter isn't little brother's doing. It was Bai Jiaying from the Mount Empress who reminded me. From what he said, it seems that before Brother Yong left for the battle, he left behind a letter stating that if no one on Mount Shenwu mentioned this matter, they can come and inform senior brother. Zhang Yan's thoughts raced. Nodding his head, he replied, Sect Master Yong has truly put a lot of thought into this. From this, it could be seen that Yong Fu had already expected that he might suffer a mishap when he headed to the battle, so he intentionally left this message with his disciple. At the same time, he could make Yong Fu owe him a favor. Chu Muran spoke from the bottom of his heart. Fortunately, Sect Master Shixiang is farsighted and prepared. Our Hanyuan school can rely on the Mountain Gate restrictive formation, so there's no need for us to move to take refuge. Zhao Gu also agreed, that's right. Hanyuan school is fortunate to have someone like Sect Master Shixiang watching over the Mountain Gate. Otherwise, when the sea comes, although we can leave, the Mountain Gate left behind by Master Shen will be destroyed. Zhang Yan waved his hand and said, ever since I came to the sacred house, I've also had disputes with a few people. For example, although Wang Guangyuan was expelled from the sect by Hui Xian, his whereabouts are still unknown. There's also that Taoist nun Wei. I'm afraid she won't give up. Senior brothers, you must be more vigilant in case she takes the opportunity to create trouble. Chu Muran and Zhao Gu hurriedly bowed and replied, we'll keep Sect Master Shixiang's words in mind. Zhang Yan said in a low voice, this matter cannot be delayed. Quickly go and deal with it. The two immediately obeyed the order and left. Zhang Yan pondered for a while. Suddenly, a strong wind blew and he flew out of the cave. In a flash, he arrived above Qingbi Mountain. It was currently the middle of the day and the sky was still about to open. He looked at the direction and flew towards the east. In just a moment, he arrived at the boundary of a hilly area. Below him, there was a village in the col of the mountain. There were 17 to 18 scattered families living there. He descended from the cloud and walked towards the village. Because it rained last night, the ground was covered with mud. But as he walked, there was not a speck of dust on him. Not long after, he arrived in front of a family. There was a cornel hanging on the door. A sturdy village woman was sweeping in front of the door. There were also 3 or 4 urchins playing there. An old man with a walking stick came out of the house. He held a piece of cake in his hand and called out to the 7 or 8-year-old child. The child's eyes were clear and he looked very intelligent. He was playing happily with a few children. But he turned a deaf ear. When the village woman saw this, she scolded and picked up a broom. She came up and whipped the child. Then, she pulled his ear and scolded, "How dare you not listen to Grandpa's call?" The old man smiled and said, "Nothing will happen, nothing will happen." He placed the piece of cake on the child's head and said, "Everything will be great. Everything will be great." The child asked, "Grandpa, what do you mean by everything will be great?" The old man had a loving expression on his face. He said, "That means everything will go smoothly for Ah Xing in the future and he will have good fortune." The village woman also said, "Of course, my Xing is born with good fortune." When Zhang Yan saw this, he couldn't help but smile. 8 years ago, when he left to open the furnace of earth fire, he sent Taoist Su's spirit here to reincarnate. And this child was his reincarnated body. He purposely chose this farmer's house. He wanted to wait for a few more years for this child's body to grow before taking him over to cultivate Tao. However, the whirlpool eye of North Sea was in trouble. He suspected that this matter was related to the 3 heavens trial, so he had to take precautions. Therefore, he wanted to take him over in advance. At this moment, the girl also saw someone walking over and couldn't help but look at him in surprise. This mountain village rarely had people, let alone a Taoist. After a while, she exclaimed and said in surprise, "Isn't this the Taoist that gave the medicine? The Taoist is here, quick quick, Xing, come and greet the Taoist." She grabbed the child and urged him to come and greet. At the same time, she looked at Zhang Yan and said enviously, "Taoist is indeed a cultivator, unlike us ordinary people. It's been 7 or 8 years, but you don't look old at all." The old man also recognized Zhang Yan and said to the child with a serious expression, "Xing, when you were born, your body was weak and you had a serious illness. Thanks to this Taoist, you managed to keep your little life. This is your benefactor, you have to greet him." The child looked at Zhang Yan a few times and suddenly knelt down, saying, "Master." Zhang Yan's eyes flickered and he said with a smile, "Oh. How did you know to call me master?" A hint of confusion appeared in the child's eyes and he said, "Xing, doesn't know either, I just know to call you that." Zhang Yan caressed the child's head and said, "Good disciple, how about returning to the mountain with master to cultivate Tao?" The child also didn't know what cultivation was, but he had a feeling that the person in front of him was very important to him, so he grabbed the hem of Zhang Yan's shirt and held it tightly, not letting go. He raised his head and looked at him with his bright eyes. Looking at this scene, the farmer woman and the old man were both happy and shocked. Dongxing continent was not like other places, it was a place where immortals and mortals were mixed. They had also heard that there were immortals in the mountains who would often come to the mortal world and choose children to cultivate Tao with. This could only happen with great fortune. The Taoist in front of them looked like he had cultivation, it was a good thing that their child was chosen, but if they followed him like this, it would be hard to avoid the separation of their child, so they were very reluctant. Zhang Yan raised his head and said, "This child and I are fated, so I will take him as my disciple. You two don't have to be sad, I am a cultivator and I have to repay the kindness of my parents before I enter Tao." You can come with me. The old man was troubled. Immortal elder, I appreciate your kindness, but my ancestors have lived here for generations, it's hard to part with the neighbors. Zhang Yan sighed and said, in a few months, there will be a flood here, it won't be able to accommodate people anymore. There are 7 or 8 families here, they can come with me back to the mountain. When the old man heard this, he was a little surprised and hesitated for a while before he cupped his hands and said, Immortal elder, my child has gone up the mountain to chop firewood, let's wait for him to come back before we make a decision. Zhang Yan smiled and said, of course. He then looked at the child and said, Xing, is this child's nickname? I wonder what his real name is. The farmer woman wiped her hands on the cloth and said embarrassedly, my husband's surname is Fu. When I gave birth to this child, I dreamed of a star entering his stomach, so I named him Fu Baoxing. Chapter 660. In front of the fire hole mountain, Tsing Tsongluan invited 2 strange-looking Taoists into the cave dwelling. After exchanging a few words of greeting, he turned and walked out again. These few days, there was a continuous stream of Taoist cultivators rushing to his fire hole mountain. They all said that they were invited by Wei Shuling. It seemed that this Shaotsang Jing disciple had also made up her mind to invite many Taoist friends from the 9 mountains and 4 seas to help. Tsing Tsongluan also knew that these people might not have come to help sincerely. Many of them had the same thoughts as him, they wanted to build a relationship with the Shaotsang Jing and gain some benefits. However, if his enemies heard about this, they would have to think twice if they wanted to deal with him in the future. At this moment, a beautiful female disciple suddenly chased after him. She stopped in front of him and said angrily, Master, these few days, many people came to eat and drink. Especially the Yu brothers of the Abundant Valley Cave. They really don't treat themselves as outsiders. Even the life-nourishing pills that Master refined in the earth furnace were stolen and eaten. Tsing Tsongluan was unperturbed and said, it's okay. It's good to be at a disadvantage. The more I offer, the more Wei Shuling owes. Don't feel bad. The female disciple was unconvinced and said, but what if Wei Shuling doesn't admit it? Do you think Master will smash the mountain gate of the Shaotsang Jing? Tsing Tsongluan smiled and said, Disciple, when have you seen Master suffer losses? It's not wrong to listen to Master. Go. He saw that there was another Daoran cultivator coming on a flying boat from afar. He immediately put on a smile on his face and hurriedly went forward to welcome him. He said, so it's Gourd Island's Xingcheng. Sorry for not going out to meet you, sorry for not going out to meet you. The female disciple pouted and transformed into a fire-plumed golden sparrow and flew back to the cave. A few more days later, Daoist Nun Wei also returned from small granary territory. Riding a cloud, she hurried here. Tsing Tsongluan and a group of fellow Taoists welcomed her at the door. Like a myriad of stars surrounding the moon, they invited her into the cave. However, Daoist Nun Wei was a cold person and did not like to socialize. After a few words, everyone knew what to do. Other than a few people who were on good terms with her, the rest left. As the host, Tsing Tsongluan naturally accompanied him. He said, although Shizhi is not around these days, I have also sent a disciple to the Shenwu mountain to gather information. He has heard something strange that might be useful to Shizhi. Daoist Nun Wei asked, what? Tsing Tsongluan didn't say anything, but smiled mysteriously and said to the maid beside him, go find Seng. The maidservant bowed and left the hall. Not long after, a clean-looking young cultivator in neat clothes walked in. He bowed to everyone in the hall and said, greetings seniors, greetings master. Daoist Nun Wei Tsing Tsongluan said, Tsing Sun, tell us what you saw that day. Tsing Sun respectfully said yes, then raised his voice and said, a few months ago, I was ordered by master to go to Shenwu mountain to gather information. However, I found that the sects in West Shenwu have all moved to the east. Even the people of the various countries have followed. It seems that they have abandoned their original place and are looking for another place to live. Daoist Nun Wei could not help but pay attention. She frowned and said, what is Deep Abyss sect doing? Even if Deep Abyss sect moved to another place, as long as they did not leave Dongshan continent, she was confident that she could still find them. However, the actions here were not normal. Sing Sun continued, Taoist Nun Wei, I heard that something like a flood is coming. The sects in Shinwu Mountain are moving to another place to avoid the disaster. Flood? Xing Qinggong, who was sitting at the side, was knowledgeable. He thought for a while and slapped the table in front of him. He said in surprise, could it be the disaster of the tidal whirlpool every 400 years? Taoist Nun Wei seemed to have thought of something as well. She said thoughtfully, so it is that. Someone asked in confusion, what is the disaster of the tidal whirlpool? Most of the people present had not heard of it and started to ask around. Xing Qinggong stroked his beard and said, this Beima Sea realm has an earth-sea cave. It is said that it is the umbilical eye of this realm and contains the mysteries of heaven and earth. It breaks out once every 400 years. When the time comes, a tsunami like a mountain will come, and wherever it passes, the mountains, rivers, and fields will become a country of water. Only then did everyone understand. Someone sighed and said, so there is such a strange place in our Dongshan continent. Why have we not heard of it before? Tsing Tsongluan said with some schadenfreude, back then, for the sake of the millions of lives in the continent, founding Master Demi specially left a 7 stars tribulation plate there to stabilize the whirlpool. He also ordered his children to watch over it so that it could not harm Dongshan continent. Later on, this heavy responsibility fell on the shoulders of Zhong Tai and Celestial Civ sections. However, after Celestial Civ sects drove it away, the treasure was taken along with it. Looks like the demon division is going to suffer a loss. Xing Qinggong nodded. The North Sea was where the Python division had settled down. After 100 years of operation, it could be called their old nest. They would not give it up so easily. They had to find a way to suppress the tide so that Dongshan continent could rest easy. They could also plot against the demon division while they were at it. Zhong Tai sect must have been waiting for this day. Taoist Nun Wei said coldly, so what? The demon division has a heavenly abode master. It is not difficult to deal with this matter. At most, it will only cause some trouble. Xing Qinggong shook his head and sighed, that is true. Cultivation at that level, supernatural power and methods are not something that we can guess. Tsing Tsongluan laughed dryly and looked at Taoist Nun Wei. He said, now that the situation in the Shinwu mountain is not stable, Taoist Zhang must be having a headache. If we go to him now, hearing these words, everyone in the room also turned to look at him. Unexpectedly, Taoist Nun Wei said decisively, wait until he gets through the calamity, then go to him. As a disciple of the Shaotsang realm, she had her own pride. She recognized that the other party was willing to give in. She disdained the act of taking advantage of others. Tsing Tsongluan thought it was a pity. If this Taoist nun agreed now and brought a group of people to force their way to him, this matter would be settled very quickly. She obviously wanted to use her power to snatch the disciple, but she still pretended to be virtuous. Even though he was cursing in his heart, he still agreed on the surface, that's true. Adding insult to injury isn't something that cultivators like us do. We'll just wait and see. The seawater will recede in 10 to 15 days. We can't wait for more than a few days. Ever since Zhang Yan issued the edict, the 38 sects on Mount Shinwu did not dare to disobey. The thousands of cultivators on the mountain began to move. Every day, there would be thousands of flying boats flying back and forth. Although there were many people from various countries, with the help of the cultivators, they had all moved to Mount Shinwu in a few months. In the cave abode of Tsangzhu Peak, Chu Mulan reported, senior brother sect leader, although the spiritual shells produced by the 7 shell farms of the Shinwu mountain have been moved to the celestial city, if the seawater comes, the shell farms will be destroyed. Wen Liang, however, was optimistic and said, as long as we are here, we can rebuild it. Our West Shinwu mountain was like the East Shinwu mountain, a barren mountain 1,000 years ago. Zhang Yan smiled and nodded, junior brother is right. Chu Muran said, among the 38 sects, Mount Amei has contributed the most in this migration. Although the other sects are not outstanding, they are still following orders. Only Longxiang sect has ignored Shixiang's orders. Not to mention that there has been no movement from their sect for a long time. It was only a few days ago that we saw their headmaster bringing a dozen disciples and thousands of servants to the Eastern Sacred House. The Longxiang sect was considered to be independent in the Shenwu Mountain. Usually, they did not interact with other sections. Back when the Yi Mountain sect was in charge of the Celestial City, they did not accept offerings. Since Zhang Yan took over the position, there were only a few dozen people in the sect. Yong Fu thought that there was a reason for him to do so. Because he did not break the old rules, he let them be. However, if they dared to do so, it was obvious that they did not follow the order of the Celestial City sect leader. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered and he asked, "Does this sect have people to worship?" Zhao Gu also said, "Longxiang sect came to the Shenwu Mountain 100 years ago. At first, they were worshipped by 2 small cities. After 100 years, there were about 100,000 people in the mountains and rivers. But this time, they only brought their servants with them. The rest of the people were abandoned. In the end, it was Su Huagate's son Tong who could not stand it and sent the people away." Chu Mulan said angrily, "After hearing about this, I sent my disciples to question them. But the Longxiang sect did not care. They did not even bother to say a word." Zhang Yan said indifferently, "Pass down my order. From now on, no Longxiang sect disciple is allowed to step into the Celestial City." The 3 of them looked stern and said, "Yes." With this order, if the Longxiang sect did not retreat from the Shenwu Mountain, they could only choose to go against the Hanyuan Gate. In the past, Yong Fu did not dare to offend the Longxiang sect. But now was different. This senior brother Yong Fu was powerful and had extraordinary methods. Naturally, he did not have to worry too much. East Shenwu Mountain, Wanghai Cliff. Xiao Zhongxiang, the master of the Longxiang sect, stood at the edge of the cliff with his hands behind his back. There were 2 swords, one male and one female, on his back. The ends of the swords were tied with a dark red tassel. His appearance was strange. His eyeballs were small. From afar, it looked like he had no pupils. Only a large area of white could be seen. His forehead was high like a hill. His hair was tied up in a bun like a lingzhi mushroom, with a dragon and snake hairpin. He wore a red satin robe. When it fluttered in the wind, it looked like a cloud of fire. Wherever he stood, there seemed to be a cold and sharp chi seeping out. Be it the grass or the rocks, they were all shattered. Even the disciples of the sect stayed far away from him. At this moment, there was a fierce wind on the sea. He looked far away and saw that there was a line in the sky where the sea and the sky met. There was lightning flashing, and an extremely bright cloud rose. It was colorful and gradually dyed the sky. When he saw this sign, he knew that the disaster was coming. He pointed his hand and a sword pellet flew out. After circling around him twice, it turned into a wisp of clear chi and returned to his nostrils' aperture. He laughed and said, "Back then, my teacher had a comment. The disaster of the tide, the disaster of the whirlpool, the dragon flying and the phoenix crouching. My chance has finally come. Chen Yuan, I will return the humiliation 100-fold." Back then, he cultivated Tao with the body of a demon. Due to his rare talent in the sword, he was taken in as a disciple by the previous Fengxiang sword schoolmaster. However, he was discriminated against. After the old master passed away, there was no place for him in the school. He went out to sea alone to seek Tao and learn the sword. He came back 100 years ago and built the Longxiang sect here, just to compete with the Fengxiang sword. At this moment, he suddenly heard a few disciples whispering behind him, "Senior brother doesn't give face to the Cold Abyss sect. That Daoist Zhang is probably going to find fault with our sect. What's there to be afraid of? If it wasn't for the fact that Master only cares about training his sword skills and has no time to bother with them, how would it be Daoist Zhang's turn to sit in the position of the person in charge of the Celestial City? He's tactful if he doesn't come, but if he does, we'll teach him a lesson." Cold Abyss sect? Xiao Zhongxiang snorted. He only wanted to compete with the Fengxiang sect and never cared about the sects in the Divine House Mountain. He just didn't care about them. If they dared to come and pick a fight, he would use them as a sacrifice to his sword. Chapter 661. 7 days later, the whirlpool broke out. The 7 colored clouds in the sky suddenly disappeared, followed by a violent gust of wind. The wind came from the sea, shaking the mountains and rivers along the way. For 5 days and 5 nights, the sun and moon lost their light and the sky was shrouded by a haze. On another day, it suddenly rained heavily, causing tsunamis and landslides. The torrents crashed into the Shinwu mountain, and the rumbling of the flood shook the mountains. Outside the mountain gate of the Deep Abyss sect, the water had already reached the top of the mountain and was still climbing upwards. However, it was blocked by the Great Mountain Guarding Formation. Although the flood waves continued to wash over and over again, they were unable to invade. However, the impact of the water on the formation was extremely loud, as if the formation would collapse at any moment. Many disciples who had never experienced such a scene paled at the sight. Chu and Zhao stood on the altar on the side of the memorial archway of the mountain gate. In order to guard against the whirlpool calamity, another array flag was added here, which was personally guarded by the 2 of them. However, the whirlpool in front of them was far more powerful than they had imagined. Unless a cultivator had reached a certain level of cultivation, they could only choose to retreat far away in front of the power of heaven and earth. Chu Muran looked at the disciples who were guarding the altars, then looked up again. He saw that the water had already reached the top of their heads, and the sky was no longer clear. Instead, it made Sangzhu Peak look like a dragon palace. Chu Muran felt a little uneasy and said, "I didn't expect the water to be so powerful. I wonder if the mountain gates formation will be able to withstand it." Zhao Gu was calm and said, "The mountain guarding formation was personally set up by Senior Brother sect leader. It should be fine." At this moment, a voice came from behind, "Junior brothers, don't worry. Looking at the current, it won't be difficult to defend for 10 days to half a month." The 2 of them quickly turned around and bowed, "Greetings, Senior Brother sect leader." The cloud beneath Zhang Yan's feet dispersed as he descended from the sky. He stretched out his hand and made a gesture. He stretched out his hand and said, "Junior brothers, you may rise." Chu Muran straightened his back and said carefully, "Senior Martial Brother, I once went to the Immortal City to look up some ancient records. According to the records, the whirlpool tide is growing stronger by the day, and it will reach its peak 7 days later. As long as we can hold on until that day, we will be safe from this disaster." Zhang Yan laughed and shook his head. "Junior brother is wrong. I don't think the flood will be as strong as today." Chu Muran was stunned. He thought for a while and suddenly raised his head, "Senior Martial Brother, is it because of the Python tribe?" Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Indeed. My Shinwu mountain is already surging with great waves, the storm on the sea is several times more violent than here. The Beima ocean boundary is now the nest of the Python tribe. If we do not want to be destroyed, we must find a way to suppress the water." Chu and Zhao, 2 people, were now convinced by their sect leader Shixiang's judgment and were relieved. Zhang Yan looked up at the edge of the sky. His eyes were deep as he thought to himself, "There is only one person in the Python tribe who has such power." Half a day later, the wind and waves passed. Suddenly, thunder rumbled on the sea, startling all the cultivators in the Shinwu mountain. They looked into the distance and saw the edge of the sky. A shocking giant python surged out from the waves, with 2 horns on its head. Its abdomen had curled claws, and its body was covered in black armor. Its head was on the sky, and its tail was in the sea. Thousands of golden-patterned serpents followed closely behind. They were so bright that they could be seen from tens of thousands of miles away. As soon as this serpent appeared, the fierce waves on the sea seemed to be pressed down by a pair of invisible giant hands, calming down the wind and waves. Someone exclaimed, "Heavenly abode Dharma form." Taoist Dong Tian rarely showed his face, so when this Dharma appeared, everyone who saw it was deeply shocked by the scene. On a mountain near the sea, a green-clothed cultivator saw this scene and was extremely excited. He pointed at his feet and said, this small wind and waves, in the eyes of the ancestor, is just a speck of dust on a piece of paper. He can wipe it away with a gentle shake of his sleeve. When he finished speaking, he seemed to have thought of something and turned around. He cupped his hands and said to Xiao Zhongxiang, who was standing beside him, "Fortunately, sect leader Xiao told us about the whirlpool tribulation, so the tribe was not caught off guard." Xiao Zhongxiang always thought highly of himself and rarely put his peers in his eyes. At this moment, when he saw the Dharma form of the Taoist Dong Tian and felt the monstrous power, his usual arrogance was somewhat restrained. He returned the courtesy and said, "Not at all. Since we are working together with your tribe, we should treat you sincerely. To fight against the Fengxiang sword sect alone, it was a pipe dream. After many tests, 30 years ago, he took the initiative to find the Python sect. At that time, he reported the incident of the whirlpool calamity. Therefore, the demon sect was already prepared and was not caught off guard like the Zhongtai sect thought. Because the Python tribe came from another continent, they were the enemy of the 5 major sects and had always been excluded from Dongshan continent. Xiao Zhongxiang was the former sect leader disciple of Fengxiang Sword School, and he was also a demon cultivator. If he could return to the mountain with their support, or even sit on the position of sect leader, he could open up a gap and gain a foothold in the continent. Therefore, the two sides hit it off. The green-clothed cultivator glanced at the foot of the mountain and said, "Sect leader Xiao, the Shenwu mountain is in chaos. It is an excellent opportunity to strike. You must seize it." Xiao Zhongxiang cupped his hands and said, "Please tell your tribe leader that I am ready to strike. In a few days, I will fight with that Taoist Zhang." The Python tribe had instructed him to seize the position of Immortal City's sect leader. However, his previous swordsmanship had some flaws, so he could drag it out and did not really make a move. Later, because he saw that Zhang Yan was stronger than Yong Fu, he felt that he needed to slow down. Now that he had made up for the flaws in his swordsmanship, he did not have so many scruples. Now that the green-clothed cultivator heard that he was finally willing to respond to the matter, he became spirited and asked anxiously, "Do you need any help?" Xiao Zhongxiang thought highly of himself and did not want to say that he could deal with it alone. However, after thinking for a while, he changed his mind and said, "Taoist Zhang has some cultivation. The Yuanying cultivator beside him is not weak either. If I want to fight with him, I need another person to help." The green-clothed cultivator immediately replied, "This is not difficult. I will go back and report to the tribe leader. There will be news in a few days." Xiao Zhongxiang warned, it must not be a demon cultivator. Although he was a demon, his identity was special. If there was another person who was also a demon cultivator and took over the Immortal City, it would most likely attract the attention of the 5 sects in advance. It would be disadvantageous for their future plans. The green-clothed cultivator said, "I know the severity of the matter." As the two of them were talking, there was a sudden noise from the bottom of the mountain. Xiao Zhongxiang immediately looked unhappy and said to a disciple beside him, "Go and see what's going on." The disciple obeyed and left. After a while, he came back and said, "Master, a few disciples from Mount E sect came. They said that this mountain was built by them before, but we took it. They want us to quickly give up this land, or else our Longxiang sect will be in trouble." In reality, the Mount E disciple was humble and polite. His words were also appropriate and did not say anything that would offend people. However, the disciple was afraid that the matter would not be blown out of proportion, so he purposely added oil and vinegar. Xiao Zhongxiang scoffed. If Mount E's sect was still around, he would have given them some face. Now, however, he did not care about them at all. He waved his sleeve and said, "Go back and tell him to tell Bai Jiaying that I have taken a liking to this place. Tell him to find another land." Before the disciple left, the green-clothed cultivator gave him a look. The disciple nodded secretly. After a while, he turned back and said, "Master, it's done." Xiao Zhongxiang faintly smelled the scent of blood. He suddenly looked back at the disciple and frowned, "Luo Guang, you killed someone?" The disciple looked innocent and said, "Master, that Mount E disciple did not know how to appreciate kindness. He refused to leave no matter what and even insulted Master. I was really angry and wanted to teach him a lesson. I did not expect Master's swordcraft to be so powerful. That person could not even block a single blow. That was why I mistakenly killed him. Master, please understand, this was not my intention. Xiao Zhongxiang stared at him for a while and then glanced at the green-clothed cultivator. He scoffed and said, kill him if you want. Keep the body. If someone from Mount Yi sect comes, just hand it over to them. When he accepted disciples, he only looked at their aptitude and never their character. As a result, there was a mixture of good and bad disciples. This disciple was even more special. He was a relative of the Luo family. Not to mention killing a Mount Yi disciple, even if he had killed by Jieying, he would still think of a way to protect him. When the Mount Yi disciple was killed, someone immediately went to inform Bai Jieying. When an elder heard this, he was furious and said, Sect leader, this matter cannot be let go like this. Bai Jieying's expression was solemn. If this matter was not handled properly, it would cause a war between the two sections. After careful consideration, he felt that he should not be impulsive. Xiao Zhongxiang's mana was far above his. Even if he went to find Xiao Zhongxiang, he would not be able to gain any advantage. Instead, he would easily fall into a disadvantageous situation. After pondering for a long time, he said in a deep voice, Elder Mo, this matter still requires Master Zhang of Hanyuan sect to come forward and make a decision. Elder Mo also knew that Mount Yi sect was not the same as before. He let out a long sigh and said, Sect leader Marshal Nephew, although what you said is reasonable, have you ever thought that if your own sect disciple was killed by another sect for no reason, the sect leader would not seek justice and instead seek help from another sect? If it happens once or twice, it would be fine. But if this goes on for a long time, our sect will certainly lose its morale. Over time, it will be inevitable that we will become the vassal of Hanyuan sect. Bai Jieying was shocked. He solemnly bowed to Elder Mo and said, Thank you Marshal Uncle for your advice. But I only hate that my cultivation is not good enough. I am not able to support the sect like my master. I am truly ashamed to face the elders and disciples of the sect. Elder Mo suddenly lowered his voice and said, Sect leader need not worry too much. You can set your mind at ease and go to that Xiao Zhongxiang. There may not be any danger. Although sect leader Zhang did not come personally, he has sent that Jinren here. He is currently on a mountain ridge not far away. Previously, our Mount Yi sect has put in so much effort for Hanyuan sect. It is impossible for him to watch as something happens to sect leader. Bai Jieying was startled. He immediately understood. It turned out that Elder Mo's real intention was to lure Zhang Boyan to come forward and cause him to go against Longxiang sect. This way, he would not lose his prestige in the sect. He had a change of heart. He shook his head and said, although there is a possibility of this, it is inevitable that Hanyuan sect will hold a grudge against them. Why don't I send someone to inform them? Elder Mo nodded and said, Sect leader's consideration is still very thorough. Bai Jieying immediately found someone and said, Go to Jinren's place and tell him that Longxiang sect has wantonly killed our sect's disciples. I want to seek justice. He then said, Elder Mo, come with me. Let's see what Xiao Zhongyong's intention is. P.S. Chapter 662. Zhang Boyan had also brought Zhao Yang with him when he came out this time. At this moment, he was on a flat hill teaching the various variations of his cultivation method. The disciples sent by Bai Jieying quickly came to find him and informed him of the conflict between the two clans. Zhang Boyan did not comment and waved his hand to dismiss the disciple. Zhao Yang smiled, Master, sect leader Bai can't take down Xiao Zhongxiang and wants to ask for your help. How could Zhang Boyan not see through Mount Yi sect's plan? He said in a deep voice, the current Mount Yi sect is considered obedient. If Bai Jieying were to be killed by Xiao Zhongxiang, the manor head would be disgraced. We still have to lend a hand. He said, I will be back soon. After saying that, he leaped up and turned into a yellow smoke as he descended the hill. Zhao Yang thought for a while and took out a flying boat. He leaped onto it and drove it to follow them. Zhang Boyan did not care about him and flew north for more than 20 miles. He saw the disciples of the two sects confronting each other on the hill below. He hid in the clouds and saw that Xiao Zhongxiang and Bai Jiaying had only exchanged a few words and were already at each other's throats. One of the elders next to Bai Jiaying could not hold it in any longer and took out a magic weapon that looked like a drumstick, shouting and cursing. Xiao Zhongxiang laughed coldly. He thought that it was because of his status that he did not join the fight. Instead, he ordered one of his disciples to go down and fight. The disciple wielded a magic sword that shone brightly. When it flew, it was as fast as a snake in the grass. The two of them stepped on a murderous aura and leaped into the air. After a few rounds, the elder's shoulder was suddenly slashed by the sword and was immediately covered in blood. This person was also ruthless and did not care about his own injury. He seized the opportunity and struck the disciple with the hammer. The disciple vomited blood on the spot and fell to the ground. They fought until both sides suffered heavy losses. When Zhang Boyan saw this, he pushed down the clouds and landed on the ground. He said with an expressionless face, "The chief once said that the sects of the divine house should not cause trouble during the tide. If you two want to fight, you can wait until the tide has passed. Now is not the time." Seeing Zhang Boyan's arrival, Bai Jiaying felt relieved. He cupped his hands in greeting and said, "Jinren, Longxiang sect killed my disciple for no reason. As the head of the sect, I just want to find out what's going on. I didn't mean to disobey Daoist Zhang's order." Zhang Boyan said coldly, "I don't care what grudges there are between your two families. If you want to talk about justice, then go to the manor head." Xiao Zhongxiang looked at Zhang Boyan and said with a cold smile, "You didn't go too far when you came, but this junior is being overbearing. Now that you've injured someone, you want to leave. How can it be so cheap?" Although Bai Jiaying's cultivation was not as high as Xiao Zhongxiang's, he was still the head of a sect. Their statuses were similar, yet he was called a junior in front of everyone. It was a huge humiliation. The disciple behind him was furious, but he held it in and said coldly, "Your Longxiang sect disciple hurt people first. What do you have to say about that?" The disciple named Luo Guang, who was next to Xiao Zhongxiang, jumped out and said loudly, "Just now, that person spoke rudely and insulted my master. That's why I killed him. If Head Bai is not satisfied, you can have a fight with me." Bai Jiaying said in a deep voice, "Since Jinren is here, our Mount East sect will not cause trouble today. Once the flood recedes, we will come and learn from you." Luo Guang relied on the presence of the elders in his sect and the two Yuanying cultivators, Xiao Zhongxiang, so he was not afraid of Zhang Boyan. How could he restrain himself? He said mockingly, "Head Bai, why do you have to care about other people's feelings? Just now, where did your courage go?" Zhang Boyan's eyes darkened and he smiled at him, "Don't you understand what I'm saying just now?" Just as he finished speaking, a dark and sinister devil flew out from behind him. It created a gust of wind and howled as it pounced over. Luo Guang was shocked. Zhang Boyan attacked without warning. Not to mention the fact that he was so close to him, he could not react in time. Even if he used his magic weapon, it would be useless in front of the Yuanying cultivators. At this moment, there was a chong sound. A magic sword flew out from Xiao Zhongxiang's back like lightning and cut the devil in half. However, the devil only shook for a moment before it closed up again and pounced forward again. The magic sword trembled and a golden light shot out, tearing the devil apart again. As the two of them fought, everyone's attention was immediately drawn to them. However, at this moment, they heard a shrill scream from not far away. Looking back, they saw the injured Longxiang disciple lying on the ground. One of his arms had been torn off by some unknown method. Xiao Zhongxiang was shocked and angry at the same time. Just now, the devil came out too quickly. He had to protect Luo Guang and guard against other sneak attacks. For a moment, he had no time to worry about anything else. How could he have thought that the other would target the injured disciple? Zhang Boyan was from the devil's doctrine, and his methods had always been sinister and ruthless, unscrupulous. He smiled sinisterly and said, "Sect Master Shao, I am acting under the orders of the chief, so all the factions of Mount Shenwu should obey. It doesn't matter if you don't remember. I see that you have brought a lot of disciples, so I'm sure you'll remember after killing a few." Shao Zhongxiang's expression changed slightly. The other party's eyes were very cunning and had immediately grasped his weakness. These disciples of his were the foundation for him to return to Fengxiang Sword School in the future. He could not afford to lose even one. Just now, he had seen Zhang Boyan's treacherous methods. If he insisted on killing his disciples, it would not be easy to stop him. He looked around and saw that many cultivators from other sects had also gathered around. He realized that the situation was very disadvantageous to him. The cultivator in green who was hiding behind saw this and transmitted his voice, "Sect Master Shao, it's not a good time to fight with this person. Let's take a step back." Shao Zhongxiang's expression changed a few times. Finally, with a gloomy face, he cupped his hands at Zhang Boyan and said, "Thank you for your advice." He did not have the face to stay here. With a wave of his sleeve, he led his disciples down the mountain. Bai Jiaying saw him leave and came up to thank him. "Jinren, thank you for your help." Zhang Boyan looked around and saw a cultivator in green among the Longxiang sect disciples. He pointed and said, "Sect Master Bai, do you know who that is?" Bai Jiaying looked for a while and shook his head, "I don't know." He turned around and said, "Elder Mo, do you know him?" Elder Mo's shoulder injury had been smeared with medicine, but his face was slightly pale. He took a few glances and said, "I know there are cultivators of this level in Shenwu Mountain, but I've never seen this person before. He must be a cultivator from outside the mountain." After Shao Zhongxiang led his disciples down the mountain, the more he thought about it, the more annoyed he became. He said to the cultivator in green, "Just now, if you join forces with me, do you think we'll be afraid of him?" The cultivator in green's expression didn't change. He said, "Once I make a move, I'll definitely be seen through. It's fine if I can make a move to keep this person here, but just now, that Taoist Zhang has already noticed me. How can I not be on guard? If he escapes, it will inevitably ruin our plan." He took out a bottle of pills from his sleeve and handed it over. "This is a good medicine from the clan. It can help Sect Master Shao's disciple reattach his arm." Shao Zhongxiang pushed it away and said, "There's no need. I can still take out the pills I borrowed." The cultivator in green knew that Shao Zhongxiang was just now forced to stop because he was embarrassed. He didn't really want to argue with him, so he didn't mind. He smiled and said, "Sect Master Shao, it's better for you to fight with that Taoist Zhang as soon as possible. Once you win the position of Celestial City's ruler, these two sects will be at your mercy." Shao Zhongxiang was still a little upset about what happened just now. He said, "If it wasn't for the safety of my disciple, why would my hands and feet be tied?" The cultivator in green said sincerely, "If Sect Master Shao doesn't have to worry, the Python tribe will take care of your disciple. That way, you won't have to worry about anything." Shao Zhongxiang looked over cautiously and refused, "No need. How can I trouble your tribe with my own disciple?" Even though his attitude was stiff, the cultivator in green was not angry. He smiled and said, "I'll go back and report to the tribe leader. In 3 days at the earliest and 10 days at the latest, I'll come back with my comrades to help Sect Master Shao win the position of ruler." At this time, Zhang Boyan had already returned to the original mountain ridge. Zhao Yang also landed on the flying boat and said that Shao Zhongxiang's disciple was taught a lesson by Master right in front of me. I thought he would make a move, but I didn't expect him to endure it. Zhang Boyan sneered and said, "The manor head will deal with this person. There's no need for me to overstep my authority. However, this person seems to have some background." Zhao Yang thought for a while and suddenly said, "This person should be a Yao cultivator." Zhang Boyan turned sideways and stared at him, asking, "How did you know?" Zhao Yang replied, "A few days ago, in order to practice Xian Gong, I went out to hunt demons and absorb their souls and blood essence. However, there were no such demons in the Shenwu Mountain, so I went to the sea to look for them. I did kill quite a lot of them. That person had a fishy smell of the sea, which was no different from those demons in the water. Even though it was very faint, I could still smell it. Zhang Boyan narrowed his eyes and said, "This is interesting." He knew that this disciple of his was gifted. His ears and nose were much more sensitive than ordinary cultivators. He could often distinguish the smell of wild animals from a few miles away. Otherwise, he would not have been able to travel thousands of miles to the Shinwu mountain to become a disciple. It was not that he was careless, but the secret methods of the devil's doctrine were hard to guard against. If he was not careful, he would be plotted against. Therefore, he had long been accustomed to using spells to seal his eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. Not even the slightest bit of strange qi could enter, so he did not notice it. After 7 or 8 days, the rain in the sky gradually subsided, and the flood that ravaged the land gradually receded. Many of the peaks that were submerged by the flood were already exposed. However, the original places of the sects were in a mess. If they wanted to rebuild the mountain gate, it would not be done in a day. On the 10th day, Xiao Zhongxiang waited. The green-robed cultivator came from the sea again. There was a person beside him who looked to be about 40 years old. He was short and wore a gray Taoist robe. He had a majestic aura and held an iron basin in his hand. The high clouds above his head were like waves. The 3 high clouds looked like they were about to merge into one. He was actually a great cultivator who was about to enter the 3rd tier. After the green-robed cultivator came up and greeted him, he took a step to the side and said, "This is Han Wanka, Taoist Han. He is a distinguished guest of the Python sect. He was originally cultivating in Donghua, and the sect he came from is very extraordinary." Xiao Zhongxiang also felt that this person was not simple. He cupped his hands in a rare courtesy and said, 200 years ago, in order to seek Tao, I also traveled to Donghua continent. May I know which sect Master Han came from? Han Wanka said lightly, "Sect Master Xiao, please forgive me. I am only an abandoned disciple of the sect. There is no need to talk about the past." Chapter 663. With Han Wanka's assistance, Xiao Zhongxiang had nothing to worry about. Although the floodwaters had yet to recede, he couldn't wait any longer and sent someone to deliver the letter of challenge to the School of Deep Caves. On Ashwood Peak, Zhang Yan casually tossed the letter in his hand to the side. After receiving Zhang Boyan's report, he already understood the ins and outs of the matter. Previously, he had been too busy dealing with the tidal vortex. If this letter had arrived a few days later, perhaps he would have already taken the time to deal with the sect. Now that the letter had arrived, he was prepared to push the boat with the current and eradicate the sect once and for all. Sweeping his gaze downwards, he said, "Xiao Zhongxiang wants to fight me on the tidal cliff of the Eastern Shrine in half a month. Junior brothers, what do you think?" At this moment, aside from Chu, Wen, and Zhao, there were also Zhang Boyan and his disciple, as well as a dozen or so profound light realm disciples seated below. Chu Muran looked left and right before speaking first. This little brother once inquired from sect master Bai. Xiao Zhongxiang seemed to have once studied under the Fengxiang sword school. Because of his demonic body, he was ostracized by his fellow disciples. He's skilled in the art of flying swords and isn't easy to deal with. In the past, fellow Daoist Yong didn't have the confidence to subdue him. As long as he doesn't cause trouble, there's no need to worry about him. Wen Liang was immediately angered. When Yong Fu was in charge of Immortal City, he didn't make a move. Now that senior brother is here, he dares to issue a challenge. Does he think that our School of Deep Caves is easy to bully? Chu Muran shook his head. That's not the reason. Xiao Zhongxiang once sparred with sect master Yong several decades ago. At the time, he won by a bit, but afterwards, it was announced that it was a draw. This little brother believes that this person must have colluded with the Python tribe in recent years. Otherwise, he would have long since seized the position of sect master. There's no way he would have endured until now. Zhao Gu raised his hands in a salute. With sect master Yang's power, Xiao Zhongxiang is nothing to fear. It's the Python clan. If it wasn't for them, how could this person be so daring? It's not difficult to get rid of this clan, but we need to be on guard against the Python clan's actions. Everyone's expression was stern. The Python tribe's power was no less than the 5 major sects of Dongsheng. To the Deep Cave sect, they were a colossus that occupied the North Sea. The ones closest to the Divine House Mountain were the Zhongtai sect and the Xianyu sect, but the two sects were currently fighting to the death. He didn't have the time to care about this place. Zhang Yan was confident that as long as Luo Mengzi did not show up, the dragon carp Luren and the 200,000 demon soldiers would be enough to stop the enemies from the sea. However, this was his hidden chess piece, and it was not convenient for him to reveal it now. He smiled faintly and said, "The Python tribe has long had the intention to invade Dongsheng, but now they are borrowing Xiao Zhongxiang's hand to do this. It is enough to show that they are also wary of the 5 great sects and do not dare to launch a large-scale attack." Everyone felt that Chu Mulan's words made sense, and they couldn't help but feel slightly relieved. Chu Mulan said, "If Xiao Zhongxiang doesn't win this time, I'll be the first one to ask for your help. Our Deep Cave sect has the Mountain Gate formation, so we naturally have nothing to fear. However, the other sects will have to worry about it." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "That is not difficult. As the saying goes, there can be no construction without destruction. All the sect's mountain gates have been destroyed, so we can take this opportunity to set up formations in each sect's mountain gates. Then, we can build altars between the mountain peaks of each sect's cave abodes and connect them with formation flags. We can communicate with each other, and this is called the sect locking formation. What do you think, junior brothers?" As soon as he said this, everyone was shocked. They didn't expect this sect leader to be so generous. If he really succeeded, then the Divine House Mountain would be like an iron bucket, impenetrable by wind and rain. After thinking about it carefully, they felt that it was very possible. The sects of the Divine House Mountain never cared about the Mountain Gate formation. Before Zhang Yan came to the east, only the Celestial City was considered to be extremely strict. When he ordered to set up formations, the other sects didn't think much of it at first, but when Hong Shao attacked, just now, they could see the benefits. Originally, because the sects enjoyed the worship of the people of the vassal states, their mountain gates were scattered everywhere. Now that they needed to be rearranged, this method could be implemented. Chu Mu thought for a while and said, "Although sect leader's suggestion is good, there is a problem. If we let the sects do what they want, it will be very inappropriate. If we send our disciples to do it, I'm afraid they won't be willing." Zhang Yan smiled faintly and looked at the dozen Xian Light Realm disciples. He said, "What do you think? Speak." The eldest disciple, Lin Xianchao, said, "This time, our Deep Abyss Gate didn't suffer any damage because of the formation set up by sect leader. I'm sure the other sects have seen this, so we can send our disciples to talk about the pros and cons." When Liang didn't like it and slammed the table. He said loudly, "Jiang Rou, you say it." Jiang Rou was very direct. She said clearly, "If there are people who don't respect sect leaders' orders, find a few of them and kill them. Kill the chicken to warn the monkey. Let's see who still dares to disobey." Zhang Yan smiled. This Jiang Rou was indeed a gentle disciple. She looked quiet, but she still had her usual demeanor. However, the two of them didn't agree with him. The former was too gentle. If they really did it, it was obvious that the sects were just pretending and wouldn't leave. The latter, on the other hand, was too firm. One had to know that formations needed people to control it. If there was a formation without people, it would just be empty talk. If the sects resisted it, they would just pretend to agree but oppose in secret. How could the Deep Abyss Gate take care of it? At this moment, Zhao Yang, who was sitting at the back, couldn't help but say, "Sect leader, I have an idea." Zhang Boyan said coldly, "If the manor head doesn't ask you, you don't have the right to speak." Zhang Yan waved his hand and said, "Don't worry about it." "Zhao Yang, tell me about it." Zhao Yang first bowed and said, "This Longxiang sect has no foundation and is not on good terms with the people in the mountains. Since they are in cahoots with the Python tribe, why don't we spread the news and add in some hard to tell if it's true or false? I don't think anyone will stand up for them. This way, the sects will be afraid of being attacked by the Python tribe and won't resist the sect leader's orders. Zhang Yan looked at him and smiled. Since you're the one who suggested this, I'll leave it to you. No matter what you do, as long as you can convince the sects to set up the sect linking formation within 3 months, I'll give you a magical weapon. If not, you'll be punished. Are you willing? Zhao Yang rolled his eyes and said, Sect leader, are the 3 Xian weapons in the floating pavilion counted as one of them? Zhang Yan laughed heartily and said, if you can really do it, what's the harm in giving you one? Zhao Yang was overjoyed and said, Sect leader, I'll definitely do it. Zhang Yan smiled and nodded. Everyone discussed for another half an hour before dispersing. After leaving the hall, Zhang Boyan glanced at his disciple and said, Kid, do you really dare to accept this? Do you think the manor head won't punish you? Zhao Yang smiled and said, if it wasn't for master's help, I wouldn't dare to boast. Zhang Boyan sneered, are you thinking that if you can't do it well, you'll make me, your master, lose face? Zhao Yang hurriedly made a fist salute and said, I don't dare. Zhang Boyan looked at him expressionlessly and rolled up his sleeves. He wrapped Xiao Yang in yellow smoke and flew towards his own cave abode. After Xiao Zhongxiang issued the letter of challenge, within a few days, there were many sects that came to him to express their goodwill. He was no longer arrogant and aloof, and promised a lot of benefits. But after a few days, there were fewer and fewer people coming. In the end, no one came, which was a huge contrast from before. He didn't pay much attention to it at first. One day, he asked a disciple and found out that the collusion between Longxiang sect and the Python tribe had already spread like wildfire. He said angrily, who leaked the news? Why didn't you tell me earlier? The disciple was trembling and didn't know how to answer. Xiao Zhongxiang paced back and forth in the room and his heart was in a mess. He understood that no matter who took the position of Immortal City's ruler, the sects wouldn't say anything. But colluding with the Python tribe was a taboo in Dongxing continent. If he leaked the news before it was done, even if he won the battle, he might not be able to take the position of ruler. At this moment, the boy outside the door said, Sect Master, Elder Luo is here. Xiao Zhongxiang suppressed his anger and said in a muffled voice, invite him in. The cultivator in green strode into the cave abode. He looked at Xiao Zhongxiang and didn't sit down. He asked, Sect Master Xiao, have you heard the rumors outside? Xiao Zhongxiang was already a little annoyed by the matter. Seeing that the cultivator had the intention to question him, he couldn't help but feel angry. He argued, I know. As long as I win this battle and take the position of Immortal City's ruler, do you think those people won't listen to me? The cultivator in green shook his head and said, the only thing we can do now is to think of a way to remedy the situation. He pondered for a while and said, during the battle, Han Yuan's sect might make a fuss about your demon body. But you came from Fengxiang Sword School. If you're careful, you should be able to cover it up. But I'm worried that Han Yuan's sect has a backup plan. It's not convenient for me to show myself here. I have to leave for the next 2 days. Xiao Zhongxiang didn't ask him to stay and said coldly, I won't send you off. Now that Wanka Han was here, there was no need for this person. The cultivator in green turned around and walked out. After a few steps, he suddenly turned back and said, Sect Master Xiao, take care. In the blink of an eye, the day of the battle arrived. The 37 sect masters and disciples of the Godly House Mountain gathered on Sangzhu Peak. At 7 in the morning, Zhang Yan walked out of the cave abode. Behind him were Zhang Boyan, Chu, Wen, Zhao, and more than 10 mystic light realm disciples. He was wearing a black robe and there were 3 big clouds above his head. 5 colors flowed and shone on the mountain. The thousands of cultivators present bowed and said in unison, Greetings, Sect Master. Zhang Yan nodded slightly and said, Everyone, please rise. Mountain Sect Master Bai Jiaying walked out of the crowd and said, Spiritual Master Zhang, a few days ago, I heard that Xiao Zhongxiang colluded with the monster division and wanted to enter our godly house mountain to cause trouble. I hope Spiritual Master can investigate this matter. As soon as he said this, the people below all agreed. In reality, the sects didn't care who the sect master was, but luring the monster division into the godly house mountain was equivalent to cutting off their path of cultivation. This couldn't be tolerated. It was better to believe it was true than not. Zhang Yan smiled and said, This matter is only a rumor. Whether it's true or not, it's not clear yet. Since I've already agreed to the battle, I can't go back on my word. If I find out later that this matter is true, I won't let him go. Chapter 664. East House, Tide Cliff. At the bottom of the cliff, the torrential waters churned endlessly, the sound was deafening. In front of the reefs, white foam flew everywhere. Everyone leaped forward, fighting to be the first. Today, Xiao Zhongxiang purposely wore a new outfit, a white feather crane cloak, a python belt, fish eyes and phoenix tail crown, a jade rui in his hand, and 2 swords were hidden behind his back. Under the sunlight, one was black and the other white, his aura was hidden and sharp. Han Wonka sat on a flat stone. This Taoist rarely spoke and was resting with his eyes closed. A disciple of Longxiang's school looked at the sun and whispered to a fellow disciple, It's almost the hour, could it be that Taoist Zhang is afraid of master and is not coming? Xiao Zhongxiang glanced at him coldly. The disciple's body trembled and he immediately stopped talking. He shook his head, afraid that his sect would be implicated. For this battle of magical powers, he only brought 2 disciples who were usually not very likable and a child. These 2 people's root tools were shallow. If it was Luo Guang and the others, they would definitely not ask such a stupid question. At this moment, Han Wonka's expression changed slightly, he opened his eyes and looked up at the sky, saying in a low voice, He's here. Xiao Zhongxiang also looked up and saw a ray of light breaking through the clouds in the distant sky. In an instant, a dignified and extraordinary Taoist appeared in the sky. His 2 sleeves swung out, and his body carried a clear qi and astral wind as he crossed the sky. He was in the distant sky, and after a few breaths, he had already arrived in front of them. Xiao Zhongxiang stood up and was about to speak when the sky changed again. After a series of rumbling sounds, hundreds of escaping lights appeared from the curtain of clouds. The brilliance was dazzling, and the sky was filled with rainbow colors. His eyes narrowed, he knew that the cultivators of the 37 sects had arrived. There were only a few people beside him, their aura could not be compared to the cultivators and they were completely suppressed. He could not help but sigh in his heart, this was just a godly house and there was already such a scene. In the past, he was the disciple of the Fengxiang Sword School's headmaster. There were more than 1,000 official disciples in the school, and there were also hundreds of disciples from the lower sections. The cultivators numbered in the tens of thousands. With a single order from the headmaster, thousands of cultivators had to obey. After witnessing such a scene a few times, he became extremely passionate about power. Thus, he yearned to enter the sect and take charge of the sect. However, his swordsmanship was not complete at that time. He was no match for his senior apprentice brother in the sect, and he cultivated with a demonic body. None of the elders were willing to support him, so he could only travel alone and return today. The Divine House Mountain was his stepping stone. Thinking of this, his gaze gradually focused. After he won the battle, wouldn't all of this land fall into his hands? I'll let you be smug for a moment. After the several hundred rays of light descended, Bai Jiaying stepped out, cupped his fists towards Zhang Yan and said, Reverend. May I have a few words with that Xiao Zhongxiang? Zhang Yan nodded and said, As you wish, sect leader Bai. Bai Jiaying stepped forward and stopped 10 steps away from Xiao Zhongxiang. He looked at him for a while and asked sternly, Sect leader Xiao. Recently, there have been rumors that you colluded with the Python tribe and intended to offer the Divine House Mountain to the other races. Is this true? As soon as he said this, immediately, a few sects that were on good terms with the Mount East sect followed suit. The clamor of voices rose to the sky. Xiao Zhongxiang himself was a cultivator of the other races. These words were actually scolding him in his face. Even though his heart was filled with hatred, his expression did not change. He said, "It's just misinformation." Misinformation? Bai Jiaying laughed coldly. "If you want to fight with Jinren Zhang without making it clear, then we will not agree to it." Xiao Zhongxiang's expression was firm. He said, "My sect has indeed recruited a few demon cultivators, but this is not a taboo." A few days ago, the sect leader of Zhongtai sect issued an edict. As long as one is willing to be a disciple of the sect, regardless of one's background, one can go. Hence, many demon cultivators from the sea came to Dongsheng. My Longxiang sect took advantage of this opportunity to recruit one or two. What's so strange about that? There would be no smoke without fire. If he just shirked everything, no one would believe him. So, he simply changed his excuse. Fortunately, he had thought about it for a long time, and it was reasonable to use it as a reason. Bai Jiaying did not have any concrete evidence at the moment, so he really could not find any fault with him. But this move was only to suppress Xiao Zhongxiang's arrogance. He did not expect to topple him. He snorted coldly and did not speak anymore. He turned around and bowed to Zhang Yan before retreating. Ever since Zhang Yan arrived, he did not look at Xiao Zhongxiang. Instead, he noticed Han Wanka, who was sitting at the side. He was surprised and thought to himself, that person's body is surging with spiritual energy, like the ebb and flow of the tide. It's obviously an aura that can only be achieved by practicing the Xuanzi Zhen Miao upper cave technique. His disciple Lu Yenny practiced this technique, so she was very familiar with this kind of aura. Other than the top 10 disciples of the sect, only those who obtained a ranking in the sect's competition could practice this technique. But there were also disciples of aristocratic families who chose this technique. It's just that they did not have the complete technique and could only stop at the level of Yuanying. If they wanted to advance to the next level, they would need to change their technique. And for this person to be able to practice to this level, it was obvious that he had a proper inheritance. He thought for a moment and thought of a possibility. He no longer looked at Han Wanka and asked Xiao Zhongxiang, "Sect leader Xiao, I came as promised. How do you want to fight?" Xiao Zhongxiang did not stand on ceremony and said, "I heard that when Jinren Zhang competed with Yong Fu, they had 3 rounds of sparring. Today, I wish to follow suit. I wonder if Jinren dares to." Sun Tong, the head of the house of Benyi, sneered, "The venue of the battle is chosen by you and the rules of the battle is also decided by you. I cannot see through sect leader Xiao's cultivation, but your skin is extremely thick." Xiao Zhongxiang ignored him and only stared at Zhang Yan. He transmitted his voice, "I heard that Jinren Zhang desired 3 types of spiritual herbs and did not hesitate to exchange for them with profound weapons. I also have a few treasures here. I don't want those treasures. As long as Jinren is willing to follow the rules, I will immediately offer them to you." Zhang Yan was slightly surprised. This Xiao Zhongxiang really put a lot of thought into this battle. He even used the fact that he needed spiritual herbs. But he did not care about the method of the battle. He smiled and transmitted his voice, "As sect leader Xiao wishes." Of course, Xiao Zhongxiang would not fake this matter. He signaled to the child beside him. The child walked up and handed over a jade box. Zhang Yan took it in his hand. He did not need to check it. He only needed to infuse his spiritual qi into it, and he found out that it contained all 3 herbs. Not only was there a lot of ghost sunflower and crouching earth lotus, there was also a lot of snake ring jewels. This was an unexpected surprise. This item had always been rare. He had only managed to collect a little of it. He did not know where this person got it from. He nodded. Xiao Zhongxiang saw that he accepted it and said loudly, "In the first round, you and I will each use a Dao technique and supernatural power. The other party only needs one person to come out and accept it empty-handed to win. Otherwise, we will lose. If both parties accept it, it will be a draw. In the second round, you and I will go up and compete. As for the third round, Hanyuan School and Longxiang School will each send out one person. We will compete to determine the winner. He did not think that he could not win against Zhang Yan. It was just that Han Wanka's presence increased his confidence. That day when he challenged him, this person's defense was very strict. No matter what he did, he could not break into the inner circle. Not only was his technique brilliant, his cultivation was even more profound. If he won the first 2 rounds, he would not need this person. If it was a draw, this person would be of great use. Zhang Yan had already expected this. Since the other party wanted to use spiritual herbs in exchange, the conditions would definitely be advantageous to him. This would greatly reduce his side's chances of winning. Therefore, he did not say much. He nodded and said, "Let's do it this way." Xiao Zhongxiang's eyes revealed a hint of fierceness. He said, "In the first round, will you go first? Or will I go first?" Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, "Head Xiao, please go first." Xiao Zhongxiang did not stand on ceremony. He looked behind him and said, "Who will come out and accept my Dao technique?" Without waiting for Zhang Yan to speak, Zhang Boyan walked out from the crowd and laughed sinisterly. He said, "That day, Head Xiao and I were in a hurry and did not enjoy ourselves to the fullest. Now, let me experience your brilliance." Xiao Zhongxiang stared at him and said, "It really is you. Good, very good." That day, Zhang Boyan injured his disciple and forced him to retreat. This greatly damaged his reputation. Now that there was a chance for revenge, how could he let it go? When Han Wanka saw Zhang Boyan walk out, his expression changed slightly. He carefully looked for a while and wondered, looking at this person, he looks like the rumored elder of the Netherworld Spring sect, Zhang Boyan. Strange, why is he here? Why did the Netherworld Spring sect extend their hands into the Dongxing continent? Could it be that they are plotting something? He frowned secretly. Once the Devil's Calamity started, the remaining 4 Devil's Caves would appear one by one in the next 1,000 years. Thus, the foundation of the Devil's doctrine was in the Donghua continent. Although the Xian had disappeared and the Devil had risen, in terms of foundation and disciples, the Xian Gate still had the upper hand. Why did the Netherworld Spring sect send an elder to the Dongxing continent at this time? While he was deep in thought. On the other side, Xiao Zhongxiang said coldly, "Be careful." After he finished speaking, he muttered an incantation. After a while, he put 2 fingers together and pointed forward. Suddenly, a ray of spiritual light appeared between the 2 of them. It was thin and as black as ink. It looked like cotton and silk, and it went straight for the center of Zhang Boyan's brows. Zhang Boyan's expression was solemn. His eyes flashed with green light like green flames, and he stared at the ray of spiritual light. This first battle was extremely advantageous to the person who made the move because he did not need to worry about his own defense. He only needed to use his full strength. On the other hand, the person who blocked it could not dodge and could not use any treasures. It was actually several times more dangerous than fighting head-on. If it was in the past, he would have used the underworld escape technique to escape and then come up with a plan to defeat the enemy. But now, he could not do that. He immediately turned his spiritual chi, and several demons flew out and collided with the spiritual light. Who would have thought that the black light would pass right through the demon's body, unable to stop it in the slightest? Xiao Zhongxiang sneered in his heart. This was a curse he learned from a Taoist when he was traveling in the South Cliff continent. It was called the 7 Emotions Hooking Curse. This curse required the condensed resentment of 9,999 people who died a violent death, supplemented by the 1,000-year black spider silk, and more than 300 kinds of impure things in the mortal world to cultivate. Under this curse, a cultivator's protective light was also useless. Once it touched the body, it would immediately be infected by the curse. It would pollute the Taoist body, obscure the spirit, and cause them to fall into the secular world's illusion. They would not be able to extricate themselves, and it could be said to be extremely sinister. It was just that when this curse was activated, it required tens of breaths, so he could only use it here. Chapter 665. Zhang Boyan was hit by the spell, and his body trembled as if he couldn't stand still. He staggered and took a few steps back before turning into a puff of thick smoke. After a while, he disappeared from the world. Everyone was stunned by this scene, including Xiao Zhongxiang. He then realized and blurted out, "Man, a doppelganger." As soon as he finished speaking, a wisp of yellow smoke suddenly rose from the ground and reached a height of 8 feet. In a flash, it circled around and condensed into Zhang Boyan's appearance again. He smiled deeply and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, can I be considered to have accepted your challenge?" When Xiao Zhongxiang was seeking the Tao in the outside world, he'd sparred with many brilliant cultivators, so before he attacked just now, he didn't forget to observe with rapt attention. However, he didn't notice anything wrong with Zhang Boyan. Even if Zhang Boyan was standing in front of him, he couldn't tell if this body was real or fake. This kind of technique was rare. He thought for a while and asked, "What's your relationship with Chu Changji? How do you know his secret technique?" Zhang Boyan's eyes were filled with green flames, and he said, "Don't compare my sex technique to that scoundrel's. Just now, the one that was broken was just a Yuanying doppelganger that he had cultivated for a long time. Although it couldn't compare to the wind sea coast's thousand spirit void tribulation water, it was still a secret technique of the Netherworld Spring sect. It could fly and looked similar to a real person. Unless one cultivated the Dharma I divine art like the Inata temple, it would be extremely difficult to see through it. As for the devil he released earlier, there was a deeper meaning behind it. It wasn't just to defend himself, but to test the depths of Xiao Zhongxiang's Tao technique. After coming into contact with it, he believed that his nascent soul clone would be able to withstand it, so he took it head-on. Otherwise, he would rather admit defeat than take it head-on and lose his life. Xiao Zhongxiang's face was gloomy, and he turned around and said, "Fellow Taoist Han." Han Wenke stood up from the rock. He took a few steps and stood in front of Zhang Yan. He cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoist, please make your move." Zhang Yan took a deep look at this person, returned the greeting, and said, "May I know your name?" Han Wenke calmly said, "Right now, I am only a rogue cultivator. This time, I was entrusted by someone to come here. After the competition, regardless of victory or defeat, I will have to leave. My name is not worth mentioning." Ever since he recognized Zhang Boyan, he suspected that the Netherworld Spring sect was plotting something. Now that he was living under someone else's roof, he didn't want to get involved in this mess, so he didn't mention his name, so as to avoid trouble later on. Zhang Yan smiled and didn't pursue the matter. He cupped his hands and said, "Please advise me, fellow Taoist." As he finished, he took 2 steps back and activated his mind. In an instant, rays of spiritual light rose from beneath his feet. It slowly rose and gathered at the top. The 3 astral clouds rumbled, and a beam of purple chi soared into the sky. Straight into the blue sky, dark clouds spread out in a flash. Between the empty sea and the sky, there was a rumbling sound. It was obvious that power was accumulating and brewing in the clouds. Normally, he didn't reveal himself. He only occasionally showed his prowess when he fought with Chu Changji and the other 5, but no one saw it. The cultivators of the various sects only knew that this person's cultivation was profound and his methods were brilliant, but in reality, they didn't know much about him. Now that they saw him wave his sleeves and gather lightning and change the weather, they couldn't help but feel fear and awe. Who knew that when Han Wenke saw it, his face suddenly changed? He blurted out, "Purple cloud godly thunder." He suddenly stretched out his hand and shouted, "Wait." Zhang Yan intentionally revealed the purple cloud godly thunder because he wanted to test him. When he heard him speak, he immediately held back his mana and asked, "What else does fellow Taoist want to say?" Han Wenke's lips moved a few times, and he transmitted his voice, "You are a disciple of the Qinsong. To be able to learn the purple cloud godly thunder, you must have received the true teachings of your sect. I wonder which spiritual master are you under?" Zhang Yan didn't answer, but asked instead, "How should I address you, Taoist?" Han Wenke was silent for a while, then said, "I am Han Wenke, you have never heard of me, but... He raised his head, his eyes shining brightly, white energy facing the sun, water cranes looking at the golden sun. Have you heard of this saying? Zhang Yan's eyes also flashed slightly. He thought to himself, so you are under this person, then you are not under Xiongren. The previous sect master Qin Qinggang had a disciple called Li Gazhang. His dharma form was called white energy looking at the sun. In the past, he was also very famous. He even fought with Xiongren for the position of sect master. However, after Qin Mabai took over the sect, most of his disciples were chased out. He didn't expect to see one here. He cupped his hands and said, my master is under Dean Danding. According to this seniority, I should call you Shixiang. Han Wenke suddenly understood, nodded and said, so you are Dean Zhou's disciple. Dean Zhou is a genius. If not for him, he would also have a chance to achieve great Tao. At this time, his face showed some doubt, but when I left the sect, I didn't hear that he had accepted a disciple. Zhang Yan smiled and said, I entered the sect more than 100 years ago, just now. It is not strange that Shixiang has not heard of me. You have only cultivated for a little more than 100 years. Han Wenke looked at Zhang Yan with incomparable amazement, then looked up and down for a while, as if he couldn't believe it, finally let out a sigh and said, since I was chased out of the Lake of Dragon Lake for some reason 200 years ago, I have not returned to the sect for a long time. I didn't know that there was such a talent in the sect. He sighed and asked, why did you come to Dongshan continent? As soon as these words came out, he seemed to realize something and shook his head, saying, I am no longer a member of the sect, you don't have to tell me. Zhang Yan smiled and said, there is no need to hide this matter. Han Yuan's sect was established by Shinjinren when he was traveling here years ago. Now that he has returned to Donghua, because he couldn't bear to abandon it, he asked me to come and take care of it. Han Wenke was startled and said, Shinjinren? Are you Shen Bai Shuang Shi Shu Shen? Zhang Yan nodded and said, yes. Han Wenke thought for a while and thought to himself, yes, Shinren Zhuo broke the boundary and ascended decades ago. Shi Shu Shen must have returned to the sect at that time. Zhang Yan saw that Han Wenke didn't speak for a long time, looked down and asked, Shixiang Han and Xiao Zhongxiang know each other? Han Wenke came back to his senses and shook his head, saying, I have no friendship with this person. It was only because I owed the Luo family a favor in the past that I agreed to their invitation and came here. But before I was expelled from the sect, I swore that I would not make things difficult for the disciples of the sect. Since you are here, it is not appropriate for me to interfere in this matter, so I will leave now. Zhang Yan smiled and said, Shixiang does not need to leave in a hurry. The third round may not be necessary. Han Wenke changed his mind and immediately understood what he meant. Even if the first round was won by Han Yuan, if the second round was won by Zhang Yan, then there would be no need for the next round and Han Wenke would not have broken his promise. He couldn't help but slowly nod his head. Xiao Zhongxiang saw that the two of them were only talking in the air and not fighting. He was suspicious, but Han Wenke was invited by the Python tribe, so it was not appropriate for him to order him around. At this moment, he saw Zhang Yan suddenly wave his hand, dispersing the lightning in the clouds, and Han Wenke also descended. Xiao Zhongxiang frowned and went forward, asking, Daoist Han, how was it? Han Wenke bowed to Xiao Zhongxiang and said apologetically, Daoist Xiao, please forgive me, Sect Master Zhang's divine ability is not something I can handle. Xiao Zhongxiang couldn't help but look at him a few times, but he was not an idiot. He could see that there was something he couldn't figure out. Now was not the time to pursue the matter, so he grunted and said, that's fine, after I defeat that Daoist Zhang, I will rely on Daoist Zhang for the third round. Han Wenke silently bowed and returned to his seat on the rock. Xiao Zhongxiang flicked his sleeve and came in front of Zhang Yan, saying coldly, Sect Master Zhang, the second round will be between you and me, follow me. With a shout, he suddenly flew up into the sky and turned into a ray of light that shot into the clouds. His speed was not slow at all. Zhang Yan smiled and his sword pellet flew out, turning into light that wrapped around his body, and he also suddenly flew up. The cultivators from the various sects were confused by the previous round, not knowing what was going on, but now that they saw the two main characters enter the arena, their spirits were all roused. They watched as the two of them flew further and further away until they finally broke through the high clouds and went above the extreme heaven. They looked at each other in dismay. With their eyesight, even though they could see far, they couldn't see through the high clouds. After Xiao Zhongxiang reached above the extreme heaven, his flying light didn't stop and continued to fly upwards. After traveling for 1,000 miles, he felt the howling of the strong winds between heaven and earth. Only then did he turn around and stop, casting his gaze over. This place was already close to the second extreme heaven, and the whirlpool of Gangqi was much fiercer than below. Normal Yuanying cultivators wouldn't be able to withstand it, and they would need to use their treasures to protect themselves. However, in order to hone his sword skills, he had cultivated here for many years, so he could come and go as he pleased. That was why he specially chose this place to fight. When Zhang Yan was 300 yards away, he steadied himself and said with his hands behind his back, "Sect Master Xiao, do you want to fight here?" Xiao Zhongxiang said coldly, "If Sect Master Zhang doesn't dare, you can also leave." Zhang Yan smiled in disdain. He had cultivated the divine contract to the fourth extreme heaven realm, so his body was sturdy and his strength could move mountains. This bit of strong wind couldn't do anything to him, so he said, "Sect Master Xiao, there's no need to say more. I will come and experience your brilliance right now." When he finished, he waved his sleeves, and hundreds of inky black water droplets flew out. Xiao Zhongxiang shouted, and threw out a funnel full of silver light. Its sharp tail was facing downwards, and its mouth was facing the sky. With a slight tremble, it released a ball of brocade cloud. Before the heavy water could reach him, it was sucked in by the cloud and mist, and actually dropped downwards. Not a single drop was left. Only the Xianming heavy water did not suffer the slightest bit of restraint, and its momentum was still swift. He could see that there was something strange about this water, and a look of caution appeared in his eyes. He did not take it head-on, but with a shake of his shoulder, he dodged it. At this moment, he suddenly felt a big cloud of haze coming down from above. He looked up and saw that it was a big hand made of yellow dust that was grabbing down on his head. The timing was perfect, but at this moment it was too late to retreat. With a shout, two rays of sword gleam, one black and one white, rose up behind him. The two rays intersected like a pair of scissors, and with a twist, a gap was torn open. His body leaped up, and transformed into a ray of light and flew out. There were 6 famous swords in Fengxiang Sword School, and each corresponded to a different set of techniques. Only by combining the techniques with the swords could one's power reach its peak. Xiao Zhongxiang was once bestowed one of the 6 swords, the 100 Shadow Sword. Later on, because he was ostracized, this magical sword was also taken away. However, when he was outside seeking Dao, he asked someone to make a replica of it. To make up for the flaws, he also made a yin sword, which was like a pair of male and female swords. Although it was not necessarily better than the original one, because it was specially made for himself, it was convenient to use. After going 1,000 feet away, he stopped the conveyance light, turned in the air, and wanted to turn back. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. He did not know when, but there were several rays of sword gleam surrounding him, and they were closing in.